Chapter 3359. The black-robed old man hesitated for a moment before suddenly frowning and looking to the side. Ripples spread over there and young Kai's figure appeared like a ghost. The old man's eyes narrowed. With his eyesight, he naturally recognized that this was the space divine technique, an extremely profound space divine technique at that. Otherwise, he would never be able to achieve such a level of teleportation. Taking a closer look at young Kai's face, a look of understanding flashed in his eyes, as if he had recognized young Kai. Young Kai glanced at the old man and his expression couldn't help but become dignified because he found that this black-robed old man's cultivation was actually at the third-layer Emperor realm. Moreover, this old man gave young Kai the feeling that he was not to be trifled with, just like when he was facing Kang Mo, a false emperor. Young Kai was surprised, but he didn't show it on his face. He had heard from Yang Yang that there were many false emperors who lived in seclusion due to the restrictions of the bottle of heaven and earth, but he never expected that the person he randomly encountered in this vast sea would actually be a false emperor. Counting Kang Mo, Yang Yang, Li Wu Yi, and Sheng Yuzhu, this was the fifth false emperor he had encountered. When the young girl next to the black-robed old man saw young Kai, her frightened eyes suddenly bloomed with surprise, sending out a message for help. Kai Yang swept his eyes over her, his heart filled with amazement. He actually knew this young girl, and her background was not small. Yarrow Lin, the great emperors of Serene Soul, Yarrow Jun, had a son and a daughter. The son was Haiji, and the daughter was Yarrow Lin. Young Kai had met both of them before. The former was in the Shattered Star Sea, but they had only met face to face and had never interacted with each other. The latter, however, had had some conflicts with him and was almost killed by him. At the critical moment, the souls of the great emperors of Serene Soul descended and scared young Kai away, saving Yarrow Lin's life. It wasn't strange to meet Yarrow Lin in the Eastern Sea. After all, the Serene Soul Palace was also in the Eastern Territory. What puzzled young Kai was who this black-robed old man was. How did he have the courage to attack Yarrow Lin? Looking at Yarrow Lin's appearance, it was obvious that she had been captured, and the corpses stained with red seawater were probably Yarrow Lin's bodyguards, but at this moment, they had long been killed. Did this black-robed old man have a grudge against the great emperors of Serene Soul? Or did Yarrow Lin accidentally provoke this old man and end up being taught a lesson? He had experienced Yarrow Lin's character before. She was domineering, arrogant, and supercilious. It wouldn't be strange if she really provoked this old man. But in any case, now that Yang Xiao had fallen into the old man's hands, Yang Kai couldn't stay out of this. Yang Kai turned a deaf ear to Yarrow Lin's cry for help. He just looked at Yang Xiao in the old man's hand and said, "Xiao, are you okay?" Yang Xiao smiled and said, "Father, don't worry. I'm fine." "Father." The black-robed old man frowned when he heard this. This title made him a little confused. He thought that this child had a pure dragon's breath, so he should be a dragon race member. But in this world, which dragon race member would call a human father? The dragon race was such a proud race that even a newborn would not lower their proud heads. Was his guess wrong? Could it be that this little fatty was not a dragon race member? Did he just have a trace of dragon race blood? Strange, really strange. I told you not to run around, but you just had to run around. Since you're fine, get your ass back here. Yang Kai shouted with a straight face. Yang Xiao's eyes twitched, thinking that he also wanted to get his ass back, but now that he was in the old man's hand, how could he just leave? He could only say to the black-robed old man with a bitter face, "Grandpa, my father told me to go back. Please let me go." The black-robed old man didn't say a word, just stared deeply at Yang Kai. A murderous aura gradually filled the air. He also didn't expect to run into someone else in this boundless sea, but what he did today couldn't be easily exposed. He was already considering silencing Yang Kai, but he felt that it was a little tricky since he was proficient in the law of space. Facing such a person, he had to be sure that he could kill him in one strike, otherwise he would definitely let Yang Kai escape. The killing intent was so obvious, how could Yang Kai not sense it? His heart tightened, and he hastily said, "Old man, we father and son are just passing by. If my son has been rude, I can apologize on his behalf. You don't have to keep holding on to him, right? He's just a child." He cursed in his heart, Doesn't this stinking brat know the law of time? Just now he slipped away from my hand so quickly, why is he so scared after being caught? Hurry up and use your law of time to get away. In this situation, he didn't dare to act rashly. Yang Xiao was in the enemy's hands, so any strange movements could cause unpredictable consequences. He had just taken Yang Xiao out of Dragon Island a few days ago, so if something happened to him now, how could he face the Great Elder and Second Elder in the future? For a moment, he was burning with anxiety, but his expression became calmer and calmer. At that moment, a red light came from afar. The black-robed old man, who had been staring at Yang Kai, frowned and turned his head in that direction, immediately showing a look of surprise. With a flash of red light, Chengqi rushed over with Mo Xiaoqi on his back. At first sight of the black-robed old man, Chengqi also exclaimed in surprise, obviously sensing the strength of the other party. Chengqi. The black-robed old man finally spoke, his eyes full of fear, suddenly realizing that the situation was somewhat out of his control. Even though he was a fake emperor, possessing strength that surpassed that of an ordinary third-layer emperor realm master, he still felt some pressure when facing a veteran divine spirit like Chengqi. Why was Chengqi here? And there was a girl on his back. Today's events were getting stranger and stranger. On the other side, after Mo Xiaoqi arrived with Chengqi, she looked around and suddenly saw Yarrow Lin. As soon as she spoke, Yang Kai's low voice rang in her ears, "Don't talk nonsense." Mo Xiaoqi quickly swallowed the rest of her words, but kept staring at Yarrow Lin. Yarrow Lin was also looking at her with a pleading look on her face. The two girls obviously knew each other. Speaking of which, they were both daughters of great emperors, and they were both in the Eastern Territory, so they had more or less met each other a few times. How could they not know each other? However, with Yarrow Lin's bad character, Mo Xiaoqi didn't have much of a deep friendship with her, just a mutual acquaintance. But at this moment, she absolutely couldn't point it out, at least not before confirming Yang Xiao's safety. Otherwise, the black-robed old man might really be forced to silence them. After all, attacking the daughters of great emperors was too sensational, and no one wanted this news to spread. That was why Yang Kai stopped Mo Xiaoqi from speaking. The situation suddenly became very strange, and everyone had different thoughts. Only Yang Xiao didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. His life was hanging by a thread, yet he was still rolling his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long silence, the black-robed old man suddenly spoke. "Chengqi, what do you mean by this?" His voice was hoarse, like metal rubbing against metal, which was very uncomfortable to listen to. The reason why he asked this was because Chengqi had been staring at him since he appeared, as if he wanted to be his enemy. This made him a little confused. Was Chengqi in cahoots with these people? Otherwise, why would they all come here one after another? If that was the case, then it was really a bad year. What do you mean by this? Chengqi's voice shook like thunder. He didn't need to worry too much about fake emperors. After all, he had followed the great emperors of the flowing time great emperor in the past. He had seen many fake emperors, so he didn't need to be polite with his words. The black-robed old man frowned and suggested, "How about we stay out of this?" Chengqi nodded and said, "Sure, let go of the boy in your hands." Him. The black-robed old man shook Yang Xiao, and Yang Xiao immediately shouted, "Gently, gently, I'm dizzy." "Yes. Is he a dragon race?" The black-robed old man asked. "You don't need to know." Chengqi spat out 2 white streams of air from his nostrils, his eyes fierce. "You only need to know one thing, if anything happens to this boy, you will die today." The black-robed old man nodded and said, "Anyone can talk big, but since it was you, Chengqi, who said it, this old master will have to consider it carefully." After pondering for a while, he suddenly raised his hand and threw Yang Xiao towards Chengqi, shouting, "I'll give him back to you." In the next moment, the black-robed old man suddenly lifted his black robe and the whole sky darkened, as if his black robe had turned into a black curtain that covered the entire sky. Taking advantage of this momentary change, he grabbed Yarrow Lin with one hand and retreated quickly. Yang Kai had already shot out and hugged Yang Xiao in his arms. Sweeping him with his divine sense, his face changed drastically as he hurriedly shouted, "Old Cheong, kill him for me." Chengqi didn't respond and had already turned into a small black dot, chasing after the black-robed old man as soon as he threw Yang Xiao out. Mo Xiaoqi fell from the sky. Qiongqi had thrown her out while chasing after her. Fighting with a fake emperor, Qiongqi wasn't confident that he could protect Mo Xiaoqi's safety, so naturally, he had to throw her away first. Xiao, are you okay? Mo Xiaoqi landed beside Yang Kai and asked, then glanced at the little fatty in Yang Kai's arms and her face couldn't help but change. What happened to Xiao? At this moment, the little brat's eyes were wide open with a look of horror on his face. Blood was flowing out of his 7 orifices and his body was alternating between red and white. Obviously, he had been poisoned. Presumably, the black-robed old man had done something when he threw Yang Xiao out. Yang Kai tore apart Yang Xiao's clothes and straightened his body. He fixed his eyes on his back and saw a clear 5-finger mark on his smooth jade-like back. Traces of evil energy were spreading out from that 5-finger mark, causing Yang Xiao's entire body to fluctuate between hot and cold. Come with me. Yang Kai didn't allow any explanation and grabbed Mo Xiaoqi's arm. With a thought, he brought her into the sealed world bead and went straight to the medicine garden, shouting, Mu Zhu, Mu Na. The 2 wood spirits heard the news and came over. At first glance, they saw Yang Kai holding a little fatty with an anxious look on his face. They were startled and hurriedly asked, Master, what's wrong? Yang Kai put Yang Xiao on the ground and said hurriedly, he was injured. I have to force out the evil energy in his body. Help him heal and stabilize his vitality. The 2 wood spirits nodded quickly. Chapter 3360. The Wood Spirit clan not only had a unique advantage in cultivating spirit medicines, but also in healing people's wounds. With 2 wood spirits assisting him, Yang Kai was naturally able to do whatever he wanted. What's more, this was the small sealed world, a world where he was the master, and everything here followed his will. Reaching out and poking Yang Xiao's body several times, Yang Kai took a deep breath and meticulously circulated his emperor qi, carefully moving it through Yang Xiao's body. He didn't know what kind of secret technique the black-robed old man cultivated, but it was definitely extremely insidious. Although it didn't take Yang Xiao's life immediately, it was very difficult to resolve. The rescuer had to continuously circulate their energy to maintain Yang Xiao's vitality. During this process, Yang Kai could even feel traces of insidious energy following Yang Xiao's body and trying to erode his own. Hateful old dog. Yang Kai didn't know who that old dog was, but he hated him to the bone. If he had the chance, he would kill him 1,000 times over. The 2 wood spirits were busy at the side, mobilizing the green fluorescent lights in the medicine garden and flying into Yang Xiao's body like fireflies, giving him endless vitality. Mo Xiaoqi was surprised by the 2 little wood spirits, but she didn't have the time to think about it now. She just prayed in her heart that Yang Xiao was safe and sound. At a certain moment, Yang Xiao suddenly opened his eyes and cried out in pain, Adoptive father, I feel so uncomfortable. Serves you right. Yang Kai's face was full of resentment, his hands moving faster and faster. If this brat didn't run away from home on his own, he wouldn't have encountered such a thing. Speaking of which, I was also a little careless. Who would have thought that I would encounter an evil fake emperor in this vast sea? Adoptive father, am I going to die? Yang Xiao asked again. Yang Kai snorted. With me around, do you think it's that easy to die? Yang Xiao still wanted to speak, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he coughed up a mouthful of blood. This blood seemed to be boiling as it splashed onto the ground, causing Mo Xiaoqi to feel extremely anxious, fearing that Yang Xiao would die if he couldn't hold on. Spitting out mouthfuls of blood, Yang Kai constantly checked on Yang Xiao's condition, constantly adjusting the output of his emperor's qi. The 2 wood spirits also cooperated well. After an unknown amount of time, the abnormality on Yang Xiao's body gradually disappeared. Yang Kai turned him over and looked at him. The 5-finger mark on his back had disappeared. However, the little guy had vomited a lot of blood and was in a very weak state. He struggled to open his eyes and look at Yang Kai. Then, he tilted his head and fell into a deep sleep. Yang Kai took out a few healing spirit pills from his space ring and stuffed them into Yang Xiao's mouth. After helping him refine the medicinal efficacies, he turned to Mu Zhu and Mu Na and said, It's done. The two wood spirits stopped their cultivation at the same time, their foreheads covered in sweat. Let him stay here for a few days and heal well. I'll leave him in your care, Yang Kai instructed. Mu Zhu said, Master can rest assured. Yang Kai looked at Yang Xiao with a complicated expression, touched his forehead, and said to Mo Xiaoqi, let's go. With a single thought, the two of them left the small sealed world. There was no one around, only a faint smell of blood. The sea below was churning as many sea monsters smelled the blood and were fighting over the corpses of the dead. Mo Xiaoqi was in a daze. She didn't know how she had suddenly appeared in a medicine garden and then in the sea, but she still asked with concern, Xiao, are you all right? He's fine, Yang Kai nodded, but his expression was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. Yang Xiao was fine not because the black-robed old man had shown mercy, but because he was a member of the dragon race, so he had an extremely strong vitality and recovery ability. If it were anyone else, even if Yang Kai and the two wood spirits treated them, they would have died long ago. That old dog's last palm strike was not only to take Yang Xiao's life, but also to distract Yang Kai so that he could escape. Such a method was simply insane, but he actually dared to attack the daughter of the great emperors of Serene Soul. Who is he? After waiting for a while, Cheongqi returned. Yang Kai looked at him, but old Cheong shook his head. He ran away. If they really fought, Cheongqi was confident that he could defeat the other party, but that person was a fake emperor after all. If he really wanted to escape, Cheongqi really couldn't do anything. He wasn't proficient in the Tao of space like Yang Kai, so he had a unique advantage when it came to escaping and tracking. So, after chasing for a while, he could only return. Although he was mentally prepared, Yang Kai was still a little unwilling to accept Cheongqi's words, his lucky. If that old man hadn't run away, Yi Shiwen, Cheongqi, and the embodiment would have had a chance to kill him forever if they joined forces. However, since he had run away, there was nothing they could do about it. It was too late to chase after him. Who knew which direction he would escape in? After pondering for a while, he asked, do you know who that person is? Cheongqi shook his head. This old master has been sleeping in the Four Seasons realm for countless years and only came out recently. This old master really doesn't know what kind of masters there are in this world. Yang Kai nodded. Senior Li and the others may know something. Rubbing his chin and thinking for a while, Yang Kai said, Xiaoqi, let's go back to Spirit Beast Island. Originally, he planned to go directly to Spirit Beast Island through the space beacon, but in order to satisfy Yang Xiao's wish and Mo Xiaoqi's suggestion, he decided to fly. Now that something like this had happened, Yang Kai was afraid that a long delay would cause trouble, so he decided to send Mo Xiaoqi back first. Yang Xiao had an accident right under his nose, so he couldn't let anything happen to Mo Xiaoqi, so it was better to send her back as soon as possible. Hearing him say this, Mo Xiaoqi didn't insist and stood obediently. Yang Kai pushed his Emperor Qi, wrapped Mo Xiaoqi and Cheongqi, and took out the space spirit bead that Li Wuyi had given him before. Forming a seal with his hands, the space principles fluctuated and formed a resonance with somewhere in the distance. After a flash of light, they felt like they had crossed through the void, and the three appeared by a lake. The world energy here was extremely rich, and the lake water was clear. Many fish could be seen swimming in it. Li Wuyi was sitting on a chair by the lake, fishing with a fishing rod in his hand. After noticing the movement, he turned his head and immediately saw the figures of Yang Kai and the others. He couldn't help but smile slightly, put down the fishing rod in his hand, and nodded to Mo Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi, you're back. Uncle Li. Mo Xiaoqi greeted him, looked around, and asked curiously, where's Auntie Feng? In her impression, Li Wuyi and Zhu Feng had always been inseparable. Although the two were not husband and wife, their relationship was better than an ordinary couple. At this time, she only saw Li Wuyi and not Zhu Feng, so she couldn't help but feel strange. I'm here. Zhu Feng's voice came from the treetops nearby. Mo Xiaoqi looked up and saw Zhu Feng sitting on a tree trunk, swinging her long legs. Auntie Feng. Mo Xiaoqi called out tenderly, flew up, and threw herself into Zhu Feng's arms, rubbing her chest. Zhu Feng, however, pinched her little ear and said angrily, you stinky girl, you went out for so long. If you didn't come back, Master would have gone to Dragon Island to find you. Mo Xiaoqi stuck out her tongue. Aren't I back now? Stop pinching my ear. It's good that you remembered to come back. Ju Feng looked her up and down. Let me see if you've lost weight. Mo Xiaoqi quickly put on a serious posture and let her examine her. After a while, she asked, I haven't lost weight, right? I'm very happy at Mother's place. She's very good to me. You haven't lost weight. Ju Feng nodded repeatedly. Suddenly, she reached out and poked her chest, whispering, not only have you not lost weight, you've grown bigger. Mo Xiaoqi couldn't take it anymore. Blushing, she turned her head to look at Yang Kai and said shyly, Auntie Feng, you're talking nonsense. I'm ignoring you. Saying so, she ran away. Yang Kai coughed lightly and cupped his fists. Greetings, Senior Li and Senior Ju Feng. Li Wuyi smiled slightly and looked at him. Did your trip go smoothly? Although there were some twists and turns, it was no big deal, Yang Kai replied. That's good. Li Wuyi nodded lightly. Since you've come to Spirit Beast Island, you're not in a hurry to go back. Stay here for a few more days. The Great Emperors also want to know the situation on Dragon Island. Maybe they have something to ask you. Yang Kai said solemnly, if the Great Emperors ask, this junior will naturally tell you everything he knows. But before that, there is something I need Senior to know. What is it? Li Wuyi couldn't help but look solemn when he saw how serious he was. Yang Kai said, it's like this. After we came out of Dragon Island, we met someone on the sea. Who? Ju Feng asked. Yang Kai shook his head, I don't know that person. He described the old man's appearance and age, then continued, there was another person with him at that time. That person was the daughter of the great emperors of Serene Soul, Yarrow Lin. Yarrow Lin? Li Wuyi frowned. What's the relationship between Yarrow Lin and that person? Yang Kai said, they don't seem to be related, and that person should be targeting Yarrow Lin. At that time, all the guards around Yarrow Lin were killed, and only Yarrow Lin was captured. Yarrow Lin also looked at me for help at that time. Unfortunately, although I wanted to, I didn't have enough strength. Under Cheongchi's pursuit, that person still escaped. Are you sure Yarrow Lin was captured? Li Wuyi's eyes widened. Ju Feng also said, do you know Yarrow Lin? This matter can't be wrong. Yang Kai replied, I met Yarrow Lin once in the past. Although it's been a few years, how could I not recognize her? I can be sure that the girl is Yarrow Lin. I believe Xiaoqi also recognized her at that time. You two can go and ask Xiaoqi. Li Wuyi and Ju Feng looked at each other, both feeling a little incredulous. There was actually someone in this world who dared to make a move on the daughter of the great emperors. Which old man drank arsenic and was tired of living? However, if this matter was true, then it would be a big deal. How could the daughter of the great emperors be touched so casually? Who could bear the anger of the great emperors? After pondering for a moment, Li Wuyi said, come with me to see the great emperors now. We must immediately inform the Serene Soul Palace about this matter. Yang Kai nodded and said, okay. Chapter 3361. The reason why Yang Kai brought up this matter as soon as they met was that he wanted to inform the Serene Soul Palace through the Spirit Beast Island. Since he had encountered this matter, and even if he couldn't save them, he had to at least send out the news. What's more, that old guy almost killed Yang Xiao, so Yang Kai wanted to know who he was. On the way, Yang Kai asked about the doubts in his heart. Li Wuyi pondered for a long time before slowly shaking his head. I don't have any impression of what you described, but if I really see that person with my own eyes, I might be able to recognize him. Although there are many fake emperors in this world, there aren't many of them. Hearing this, Yang Kai couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He thought that Li Wuyi would know the identity of that old guy, but he didn't expect that he couldn't say anything. But it was no wonder. After all, who knew if that old guy changed his appearance without seeing it with his own eyes? Along the way, they soon came to a pavilion. There was a small bridge over flowing water, and the scenery was unique. A tall and sturdy man stood at the head of the bridge, throwing fish food into the water below, causing red carps to fight over it, splashing water everywhere. Just from this person's appearance, there was nothing unusual about him at all. He didn't even have the bearing of a superior. He was just naturally burly and strong, But those who knew him knew that this was one of the 10 famous great emperors in the star boundary, the martial beast Mo Huang. "You're back." Mo Huang looked up at Yang Kai, smiled slightly, and continued to throw the fish food in his hands. Yang Kai cupped his fists solemnly. "Yang Kai greets master." Mo Huang nodded gently and asked faintly, "Is Xiao Qi back too?" Yang Kai said, "She's back and is talking to Senior Jiufeng." Mo Huang nodded and didn't say anything else. Li Wui stepped forward and said with a serious expression, "Master, something happened." Mo Huang looked up and narrowed his eyes slightly. He threw the fish food in his hands clean, then clapped his hands and said, "What happened?" For Li Wui to say such a thing, it was definitely not a small matter. Otherwise, Li Wui's expression would not be so serious. He instinctively thought that something had happened on Dragon Island, and perhaps it was related to Fu Xian. Li Wui said, "Yarrow Lin was captured by an unknown old man, and all her guards were slaughtered." Mo Huang frowned. "Yarrow Lin? Yarrow Jun's daughter? Not bad." Mo Huang asked curiously, "How did you know?" Li Wui said, "Yang Kai saw it on his way back. The first miss was also there. The one who did it was a fake emperor." Mo Huang was even more surprised. A fake emperor. Although a fake emperor was not ordinary, which fake emperor would have the guts to touch the daughter of the great emperors? Since he could cultivate to the level of a fake emperor, there was no reason for him not to know the descendants of the great emperors. Even if he had offended them, he would have only given them a light punishment. However, he had slaughtered their guards and taken them away. He had offended Yarrow Jun. "Are you sure about this?" Mo Huang asked with a frown. Li Wui turned his head to Yang Kai. Yang Kai said seriously, "There is no doubt about it. I can recognize Yarrow Lin, and Xiao Qi can recognize Yarrow Lin as well." Hearing Yang Kai call his baby daughter Xiao Qi so intimately, the corner of Mo Huang's mouth couldn't help but twitch. He stared deeply at Li Wui with a meaningful expression. Li Wui said, "Shouldn't we inform the Serene Soul Palace about this?" Mo Huang nodded. "Yes, we should. It would be best if it was a misunderstanding, but if that is the case, we should inform them." Saying so, Mo Huang suddenly reached out and took out a jade slip. His divine sense surged and poured some information into it. Then, with a flick of his finger, the space principles fluctuated and the jade slip suddenly disappeared. Seeing this scene, Yang Kai immediately understood that Mo Huang and Yarrow Jun must have used Li Wui's space beacon to establish a connection between them. It wasn't strange when he thought about it. They were all great emperors, and they were all on the Eastern Sea. They could be considered neighbors, so it was normal for them to communicate with each other. Changing the topic, Mo Huang looked at Yang Kai and asked, "Is there anything unusual on Dragon Island?" Yang Kai immediately understood what Mo Huang was getting at and immediately said, "Everything is normal." The third elder didn't receive any harsh treatment. Xiao Qi went to see her this time and she was very happy. Mo Huang's expression softened a lot and the corner of his mouth curved into a smile. "That's good." He then asked, "They didn't make things difficult for you this time, did they?" If Fu Xian and Zhu Qing shared the same fate, then Yang Kai and Mo Huang could be said to share the same fate. Both of them had slept with the same dragon girl and were not welcomed by Dragon Island. Yang Kai rubbed his nose and said, "Not bad, the misunderstanding with Dragon Island has been resolved." Mo Huang was stunned. "Resolved? What do you mean?" Even though he was one of the great emperors, he couldn't help but be shocked when he heard this. Yang Kai blinked and said, "It means what it means." Mo Huang looked at him with a brilliant expression. "Don't tell me that Dragon Island is no longer hostile to you." Yang Kai coughed dryly. At first, they were a little hostile, but later, they became quite enthusiastic. Enthusiastic? Mo Huang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Yang Kai was completely stunned. Li Wui also looked at Yang Kai with an incredulous expression. The word enthusiastic could be used to describe anything, but it didn't fit well with the dragon race. How could the people of the dragon race be enthusiastic about an outsider? Mo Huang was one of the great emperors, but because he had a daughter with Fu Xian, he was hunted down and killed by Dragon Island. They even almost came to Spirit Beast Island. Although Yang Kai was considered a rising star, he was only a rising star. In terms of cultivation and status, he couldn't even compare to Mo Huang. How could such a person be treated so well by Dragon Island? How could Fu Shi be so easy to talk to? Yang Kai naturally saw the doubts in their hearts. He scratched his face and said, "Little Seven knows the whole story. If Master has the time in the future, why don't you ask her?" He didn't want to explain anything in detail. Otherwise, Yang Xiao would be involved, and it wasn't something that could be explained in 1 or 2 words. At this moment, a wave of spatial fluctuation came. The 3 of them all sensed it. Mo Huang reached out and grabbed in the air, and a jade scroll appeared in his palm. It wasn't the one he took out before, but another one. This was obviously a reply from the great emperors of Serene Soul. After a little investigation, Mo Huang frowned and said, "That girl Yarrow Lin might really have been captured." "What did the master say?" Li Wui asked. Mo Huang crushed the jade scroll and shook his head. Yarrow Jun couldn't contact Yarrow Lin and her guards. If they couldn't contact them, it meant that they were doomed. Otherwise, it was impossible for there to be no reply. Combined with what Yang Kai said before, it was certain that Yarrow Lin was captured. "Do you have any urgent matters to deal with?" Mo Huang looked at Yang Kai and asked. Yang Kai didn't know why he asked this, so he shook his head and said, "Not for the time being, but the matter in the Eastern Territory is settled. I'm going to return to the Northern Territory." Mo Huang nodded and said, "Since there's nothing urgent, you don't have to leave in a hurry. Stay here for a few days. The Serene Soul Palace will send someone to ask you something." Yarrow Lin's capture was of great importance, and Yang Kai was a witness at the scene, so he naturally had to ask. Yang Kai could understand, so he nodded and said, "Okay." Anyway, he planned to stay on Spirit Beast Island for a few days. Firstly, he wanted to appreciate the scenery of Spirit Beast Island, and secondly, he wanted to arrange a space array here. This way, it would be much more convenient for him to communicate with Spirit Beast Island in the future, or between Spirit Beast Island and Dragon Island. After bidding farewell to Mo Huang, Yang Kai was led by Li Wui to a courtyard near the sea. The courtyard covered a large area, and the scenery was beautiful. It was nice to watch the tide rise and fall. The next day, Yang Kai toured Spirit Beast Island accompanied by Mo Xiaoqi. The entire Spirit Beast Island was a huge island protected by a large spirit array. Outsiders couldn't discover the existence of Spirit Beast Island from the outside. Only those who were familiar with its location could find it. The island was rich in spirit chi, with beautiful mountains and clear waters. From time to time, they could see many rare monster beasts, each exuding an extremely terrifying aura. Martial beasts were based on beast taming, so the island naturally didn't lack these things. Spirit Beast Island also had its own beast hunters, who searched for all kinds of rare existences all year round. Now, there weren't many living people on Spirit Beast Island, but there were at least 800 monster beasts, each of them with extraordinary origins. These monster beasts even understood human nature and were especially close to Mo Xiaoqi. What was rare was that Mo Xiaoqi actually gave each of them a name, and she even remembered them. Yang Kai's deepest impression of the many monster beasts on Spirit Beast Island was a 7-colored deer. Compared to the other monster beasts, it wasn't very tall, only about 3 meters tall, but it was a descendant of the ancient divine spirit, the 9-colored deer, and was very handsome. There were many monster beasts on the island with the bloodline of the divine spirit, it was just a matter of numbers. However, bloodline was bloodline. Although they all had a glimmer of hope of reproducing the glory of their ancestors, it was harder than ascending to the heavens for them to do so. After a tour, Yang Kai couldn't help but sigh. On the surface, Spirit Beast Island only had a few masters, but in fact, each monster beast was extremely terrifying. 2 days later, Yang Kai came to a suitable place under the lead of Li Wuyi, and prepared to arrange the space array. Originally, Li Wuyi wanted to arrange it himself and let Yang Kai supervise and guide him. However, if Li Wuyi arranged it himself, he wouldn't be able to establish a connection with the many arrays that Yang Kai had arranged before, and it would lose its original purpose. Helplessly, Li Wuyi could only let Yang Kai do it while he observed carefully from the side. He had observed it once in the Heavenly Wolf Valley last time, and this was the second time. Both of them were proficient in the Tao of space, and space arrays and space beacons had many similarities. Therefore, when Yang Kai finished arranging the array, Li Wuyi had already mastered it. In the future, he could also arrange arrays all over the star boundary like Yang Kai and travel back and forth. However, it was hard to say which was more convenient between space arrays and space beacons. Space arrays could teleport more people at once, but it was a bit troublesome to arrange them. Space beacons were convenient, but they had a lot of limitations. On the 5th day after Yang Kai came to Spirit Beast Island, people from the Serene Soul Palace came. Chapter 3362. In the main hall, Yang Kai, accompanied by Mo Xiaoqi, hurried over after receiving the news. Before he entered, he saw 2 guards from the Emperor realm standing guard outside the hall. They were exuding a very strange aura that Yang Kai felt was somewhat familiar. Thinking about it carefully, this aura was somewhat similar to the aura of the Netherworld sect's cultivator. Yang Kai immediately understood that these 2 guards from the Emperor realm should be from Serene Soul Palace. However, the guards from the Emperor realm were only gatekeepers, so the status of these people in Serene Soul Palace was definitely not low. Could it be that the great emperors of Serene Soul have come in person? Yang Kai's heart skipped a beat as he quickened his pace. To be honest, if the great emperors of Serene Soul were really here, Yang Kai didn't know how to face them. After all, he had almost killed Yarrow Lin back then, provoking Yarrow Jun's soul to surrender one of Yarrow Lin's guards. Only then did Yang Kai stop, so he had offended these great emperors. However, after thinking about it carefully, although he wanted to kill Yarrow Lin back then, he didn't really do it. Moreover, it was Yarrow Lin's fault in the end. As long as the great emperors of Serene Soul were reasonable, they would have no reason to blame him. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let him go. After making up his mind, Yang Kai strode into the hall under the gaze of the 2 guards from the Emperor realm. In the hall, Li Wuyi was talking to a woman in palace attire. The woman had a cold appearance, her hair was tied up high, and a light green dress set off her enchanting figure. Her breasts were high, and a silk belt was tied around her waist, making her slender waist look like it could be held with one hand. She was about 30 years old and had boundless charm that could cause one's imagination to run wild. Behind the woman stood an old woman with white hair and turbid eyes, looking like she had one foot in the grave. But whether it was the woman or the old woman, they were both from the Emperor realm, especially the cold woman whose cultivation had reached the 3rd order Emperor realm. Although the old woman was not in the 3rd order, she was still in the 2nd order. When Yang Kai arrived, the woman's cold face was filled with anxiety and annoyance. Obviously, she was a little impatient from waiting. When she spoke to Li Wuyi, she only said a few perfunctory words, obviously absent-minded. Seeing Yang Kai come in, the woman and the old woman turned to look at him at the same time. Yang Kai suddenly felt like he was being pointed at by 2 sharp swords. Yang Kai frowned, a look of confusion on his face. He didn't know this woman and the old woman, but he could clearly feel hostility from them, and this hostility was directed at him. "What are you doing? I don't have any grudges with you, do I?" Yang Kai cursed silently. "Yang Kai is here." Li Wuyi stood up. Yang Kai cupped his fists and greeted, "Senior." Li Wuyi nodded and said with a solemn expression, "This is Madame Rong from Serene Soul Palace. Madame Rong wants to ask you about what you saw that day. You must answer truthfully. Madame Rong is also Yarrow Lin's biological mother." Yang Kai was surprised and looked at Madame Rong carefully. No wonder he felt that this woman was somewhat similar to Yarrow Lin. It turned out that they were mother and daughter. No wonder. But if she is Yarrow Lin's mother, then isn't she the wife or concubine of the Serene Soul Great Emperors? No wonder Li Wuyi wanted to accompany her in person. With such a powerful background as the Serene Soul Great Emperors, Spirit Beast Island obviously couldn't be neglected. Thinking so, Yang Kai cupped his fists and greeted, "Greetings, Madame Rong." Li Wuyi pointed to Yang Kai and said, "Madame Rong, this is the Yang Kai I told you about. When your daughter was kidnapped, he was nearby and can be considered an eyewitness. If you have any questions, just ask him." Madame Rong's beautiful eyes stared at Yang Kai with a gloomy expression. It wasn't clear if she heard Li Wuyi's words, but she said lightly, "You are that Yang Kai?" What did she mean by "I am that Yang Kai"? Kai frowned. Could there be many Kai in this world? He nodded and said, yes, I am that Kai. Madame Rome continued to ask, did you see Lina being captured that day with your own eyes? Are you sure you didn't see wrongly? There was no question in her words, but her tone was somewhat interrogative. Li Wui obviously heard it and couldn't help but frown. He looked at Madame Rome suspiciously. He felt that she seemed to have some hostility towards Kai, but as far as he knew, this Madame Rome stayed in the Serene Soul Palace all year round, so how could she have any conflict with Kai? Since she was being impolite, Kai naturally wouldn't be too enthusiastic. He said indifferently, I have reported everything I saw that day to the Beast Warrior Master. I believe that the Beast Warrior Master has already sent a message to the Serene Soul Master. If Madam doesn't believe me, you can ask Xiao Qi. Xiao Qi was also there at the time. Mo Xiao Qi nodded and said, yes, that was indeed Sister Yarolin. She was captured by an old man in a black robe. With Mo Xiao Qi's confirmation, the last bit of hope in Madame Rome's heart disappeared. She could still doubt Kai's words, but she couldn't doubt Mo Xiao Qi's words at all. Mo Xiao Qi and Yarolin knew each other, so it was impossible for her to be mistaken. Combined with the current situation, it was clear that Yarolin was really captured. After a moment of silence, Madame Rome looked at Kai and gritted her teeth. Why didn't you save her? Kai looked up at her in surprise and asked, how? Madame Rome said angrily, do I need to teach you how to save people? Since Lina was captured, of course we had to get her back. Did you just watch that person take Lina away and do nothing? Kai couldn't help but laugh. Madam, I'm afraid you don't know. The person who took action that day was a fake emperor. So what if he was a fake emperor? Madame Rome was a little hysterical. A fake emperor is also a human. Can a fake emperor do anything to Lina? Can a fake emperor scare you away? Kai's face darkened. Madam, are you blaming me? What the hell? This matter involved the Serene Soul Palace, so Kai didn't have any objections when they came to question him. With Martial Beast's instructions, Kai was prepared to cooperate. After all, it was just a simple situation at that time. Who knew that Madame Rome would be hostile to him as soon as they met and now even accuse him of not saving people? Kai really wanted to pry open her head and see if it was filled with water. Is this how the concubines of the great emperors of Serene Soul behave? How dare you? The old woman standing behind Madame Rome shouted at Kai angrily, how dare you speak to Madame like this? Slap your mouth. Kai blinked, his face full of confusion. It was one thing to run into a weirdo like Madame Rome, who could be explained as someone who loved her daughter and spoke without thinking. But what was with this old woman? Seeing him remain indifferent, the old woman became even more annoyed and shouted, why haven't you acted yet? Her pair of turbid eyes flashed a terrifying light as she glared fiercely towards Kai. Kai's mouth twitched as he looked at her and said, are you telling me to slap myself? The old woman sneered, since you like to play dumb, don't blame this old woman for bullying you. As soon as she finished speaking, her withered body flew up like a big bird and raised her hand to slap Kai's face. Emperor's chi surged in her palm, and it looked like she really wanted to slap Kai's face. Kai was furious. Respecting the old and loving the young is my virtue, but it's not something you can rely on. Originally, Kai didn't want to lower himself to the old woman's level. After all, she was already so old, and he didn't want to bully her. But since she had already slapped him, how could Kai remain indifferent? His emperor's chi surged as he slapped forward. Li Wuyi held his forehead and sighed. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. He thought it was just a routine questioning, but who knew that after a few words, they would actually start fighting. As an outsider, he naturally knew who was right and who was wrong, and he was a little angry. After all, this was Spirit Beast Island. Even if Kai wasn't from Spirit Beast Island, he was still a friend of his young miss. Even if you were from Serene Soul Palace, you should at least give some face, right? Slapping the young miss's friend on Spirit Beast Island was a disgrace to Spirit Beast Island. So, even if he had the ability to stop such a conflict, he wasn't in a hurry to do so. He just wanted to teach the old woman a lesson and let her know who was the master here. Although the old woman was a second-order Emperor Realm Master like Yang Kai, one had one foot in the grave, while the other was full of vigor. What's more, how could Yang Kai be an ordinary second-order Emperor Realm Master? Even if he thought with his toes, Li Wuyi knew that the old woman was destined to suffer a big loss. Sure enough, the old woman's powerful strike was nothing more than an embroidered pillow in front of Yang Kai's counterattack. The moment the two palms collided, the old woman's expression suddenly changed. She only felt a surging force bombarding her. Her palm strike didn't have any effect at all. Instead, it was the other party's palm strike that enveloped her. With a crisp bang, the old woman somersaulted several times in the air before landing hard on the ground. Several of her teeth flew out. She struggled to stand up, but before she could get up, she spat out another mouthful of blood. Her aura suddenly weakened greatly. She looked up at Yang Kai and said in disbelief, "You dare to attack me?" She spoke with a slight lisp. After all, she had lost several of her teeth. Yang Kai looked at her with a sneer and waved his hand. "You can try again." Madame Rome was also dumbfounded by the sudden turn of events. It was only now that she came back to her senses and shouted angrily, "Boy, you're courting death." Although the old woman's relationship with her was that of master and servant, they were as close as mother and daughter. Seeing the old woman suffer a loss, Madame Rome, who already disliked Yang Kai, couldn't help but turn red. She no longer cared about her status and immediately wanted to teach Yang Kai a lesson to vent her anger for the old woman. As she circulated her emperor chi, a low shout rang out, "Enough." Space seemed to freeze. Madame Rome felt as if several mountains were pressing down on her, and even her breathing was a little difficult. Her pretty face was gloomy as she turned her head to the side and gritted her teeth. "Li Wuyi, what are you doing?" Even if Li Wuyi didn't really attack, just slightly circulating his space principles was enough to prevent her from retaliating. Li Wuyi stared at her with a sullen expression and said lightly, "This king just doesn't want to embarrass Madame too much. I hope Madame can behave herself. This short-sighted woman, do you think you can do whatever you want just because you're a minor realm higher than Yang Kai? If I don't stop you, you might even be beaten up." Chapter 3363. It was fine if the old woman was beaten because she was too arrogant and rude, but Madame Rome was the woman of the serene soul great emperors. If she was really beaten by Yang Kai on Spirit Beast Island, it would be fine on Spirit Beast Island, but Yang Kai would be in trouble. He couldn't figure it out. Why would the serene soul great emperors send these two women to question him? Was there no one else in the serene soul palace? "You dare to look down on this queen?" Madame Rome's face was so gloomy that it almost dripped water. Although Li Wuyi's words were vague, how could she not understand? Li Wuyi's words were clearly implying that she was inferior to Yang Kai. Although she was a woman, she was still a third-order Emperor Realm Master, while Yang Kai was just a second-order Emperor Realm Master. How could she be inferior to him? Li Wuyi intervened just to protect the other party. "Now I know why Yarolin's character is so bad. It turns out that she has a mother like you. It would be strange if she had a good character." Yang Kai coldly snorted. Now it seemed that Yarolin and Madame Rome were not only similar in appearance, but also in character. Sure enough, a loving mother leads to a useless son. Madame Rome gritted her teeth and said, "It's not up to you to judge Linna's character." She turned to look at Li Wuyi and said, "Are you going to step aside or not?" Looking at her posture, she was determined to teach Yang Kai a lesson. Li Wuyi lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "Not long ago, Netherworld Sect and Brahma Holy Land were destroyed. I'm sure Madame has heard about it." Madame Rome frowned, not knowing why Li Wuyi brought it up at this time. She said impatiently, "So what?" Li Wuyi continued, "I wonder if Madame Rome thinks she is stronger than Fu Bo and Shu Changfeng?" Madame Rome quickly said, "What are you trying to say?" Li Wuyi sighed and stared deeply at her. This woman was really unreasonable and stupid. She was just a little good-looking, but he really didn't know how the great emperors of Serene Soul fell in love with her. If it was someone else who was a little smarter, how could they not guess what was going on? But she, on the other hand, still looked confused. Although the Netherworld Sect and Brahma Holy Land were destroyed by a Han Temple, the root cause was that the masters of these two great forces had been wiped out, and the person who caused all this is standing right in front of you. You! Madame Rong hadn't reacted yet. She stared at Li Wui in amazement, wondering why Li Wui would attack the people of Netherworld sect and Brahma Holy Land. Could it be that those people had provoked him? On the contrary, the old woman's eyes flashed with a trace of shock. She glanced at Yang Kai and hurriedly walked to Madame Rong's side and whispered a few words. Madame Rong's expression changed, and she finally focused her attention on Yang Kai. Does Madame still want to make a move? If so, please do as you wish, but this Li won't interfere with the consequences. Li Wui looked at her indifferently. Madame Rong looked conflicted, but in the end, she flicked her sleeves and said, "This Madame doesn't want to bully the weak." What a joke! Someone who could destroy so many great forces in the Emperor realm. She was afraid she wasn't his opponent. If she insisted on making a move, she would only suffer. She glared hatefully at Yang Kai. This queen will remember today's matter. Boy, you're on your own now. Let's go. After saying this, he led the old woman away. Before the old woman left, she glared at Yang Kai with resentment, as if she wanted to remember him forever. After all, she had never suffered such a big loss before, so she was naturally angry. Speaking of which, although she was old and only a second-order Emperor Realm Master, she had the backing of Serene Soul Palace and Madame Rong. In the Eastern Territory, anyone who saw her had to treat her with respect. She had never been slapped in the face before, let alone lose a few teeth. Inside the hall, Yang Kai and Li Wui looked at each other, speechless. A few days ago, they knew that someone from Serene Soul Palace would come to ask questions, but no one expected things to develop like this. Li Wui smiled bitterly. What kind of conflict do you have with that Madame Rong? Yang Kai shook his head. It's the first time we met, so there's no conflict. Li Wui asked curiously, then why was she so hostile towards you when you just met her? If it weren't for this preconceived notion, this conversation wouldn't have become so tense. Although they couldn't get anything out of him, Yang Kai had already told Mo Huang everything he knew, and Mo Huang had also sent a message to Serene Soul Palace. Yang Kai pondered for a moment, then said thoughtfully, maybe it's because of Yarrow Lin. Back then, I had a conflict with Yarrow Lin and almost killed her. She should have told this to Madame Rong, so Madame Rong is hostile towards me. After listening to his explanation, Li Wui nodded, that makes sense. Sigh, it's just a woman's view. Although Yang Kai had some conflicts with Yarrow Lin in the past, that was all in the past. Now that Yarrow Lin had been captured, if it had been anyone else, they would have asked about the situation carefully instead of showing off their domineering arrogance. However, since Madame Rong acted this way, it wasn't Yang Kai's fault. So what if the old woman hit him? The great emperors of Serene Soul Palace wouldn't stand up for an old woman. They should be tracking down Yarrow Lin's whereabouts at this moment. Yang Kai stayed on Spirit Beast Island mainly because he was waiting for the people from Serene Soul Palace to come. Now that the matter was over, it was time to go home. He went to see Mo Huang again and bid him farewell. Only then did he step onto the space array under the escort of Li Wui, Mo Xiaoqi, and Zhu Feng. Shuttling through the void, his vision blurred and he appeared in the High Heaven Palace in the Northern Territory. The disciple guarding the array noticed the abnormality and turned his head to look. After seeing Yang Kai, he immediately saluted. At the same time, someone sent a message to Hua Qing-sai to report. Hua Qing-sai had specifically instructed him to inform her as soon as Yang Kai returned. It couldn't be helped. This master of the palace was really elusive and rarely stayed in the High Heaven Palace. Moreover, he would be gone for several years or more. This time, it was still fine as he had only been gone for a little more than a year. The last time he went to the Lower Star Territory, he didn't show up for more than 10 years. Although Hua Qing-sai was the chief steward of the High Heaven Palace, she was still just a chief steward. There were many things that she needed to report to Yang Kai. It was Chengqi's first time coming to the High Heaven Palace. However, he had learned that his young master had established a sect in the Northern Territory. Moreover, it was not small and there were many experts in the sect. Now that he had finally arrived, he naturally wanted to take a look around. After informing Yang Kai, Chengqi put his hands behind his back and leisurely toured the peaks of the High Heaven Palace. Yang Kai naturally let him be and returned to his high heaven peak. After tidying up a little, he raised his hand and let the little fatty Yang Xiao out. The little brat complained as soon as he appeared, "Adoptive father, why did you lock me up for so long?" The dragon race was indeed a dragon race. Previously, with the treatment of Yang Kai and the two wood spirits, Yang Xiao's injuries had healed in 2 to 3 days. However, when Yang Kai was on Spirit Beast Island, he didn't let him out as he was afraid that he would cause trouble. It was only when he returned to the High Heaven Palace that he was allowed to see the light of day again. "I am your adoptive father. I can do whatever I want to you. Why are you complaining so much?" Yang Kai snorted. Yang Xiao's eyes turned and he smiled apologetically. "Adoptive father, please calm down. I was just saying." He looked around and asked, "Where is this place?" "The Northern Territory, the High Heaven Palace." Yang Xiao blinked, a blank look on his face. Yang Kai said again, "The High Heaven Palace is my sect. You will live here in the future. Remember to be obedient and don't cause trouble. Do you understand?" "I understand, I understand." Yang Xiao nodded his head like a chicken pecking rice. He looked at Yang Kai curiously and said, "Adoptive father, you said that the High Heaven Palace is your sect. Are you the palace master here?" "That's right." Yang Kai nodded. Yang Xiao was overjoyed when he heard this and jumped 3 feet high. "Wahahaha, then isn't this young master the young palace master here?" After saying this, his face lit up. "Adoptive father, how many people are there in the High Heaven Palace? How strong are they?" This kid's ability to adapt was quite strong. After learning that Yang Kai was the palace master of the High Heaven Palace, he immediately added the word High Heaven Palace in front of the name. Obviously, he treated this place as his home. Speaking of which, Yang Kai and he were as close as father and son. The High Heaven Palace was Yang Kai's home, so it was naturally his home as well. "You will know in the future. Why are you asking so much?" Yang Kai reprimanded him with a straight face. After saying this, his expression changed and he looked outside. Hua Qing Sai walked in with a worried expression. She glared at Yang Kai bitterly and bowed. "Palace Master. Sister Hua." Yang Kai smiled. Hua Qing Sai snorted and said, "Palace Master, you are still willing to come back?" Yang Kai sniffled and said, "What are you saying? The High Heaven Palace is my home. How could I not come back?" Hua Qing Sai said, "There were so many things to do with the Southern Territory's disciples' migration, but you just patted your butt and left. Now that everything has been settled, you actually came back. The Palace Master is really living a carefree life. Sister Hua is really envious." Yang Kai clenched his fists and coughed. "Capable people are always busy. Also, I have something to take care of. Is there anything going on at the Orthodoxy Palace's branch sect? There are 3 Monster King guarding it. What could happen? What about the Northern Territory? Everything is normal." "Ien, that's good." Yang Kai laughed. "It seems that our High Heaven Palace is thriving under Sister Hua's management. It doesn't make a difference whether I am here or not. Stop flattering me. I am going to say goodbye to you." Yang Kai was taken aback. "Goodbye?" Hua Qing Sai sighed. "Ien, if I continue to work like this, I'm afraid this Sister Hua will become old in a few years. I don't want to become like that too early." Saying so, she looked at Yang Kai with a smile. How could Yang Kai not know that she was just complaining to him and not really saying goodbye? But then again, Sister Hua was really tired. She had to take care of the basic necessities of the 100,000 disciples, the distribution of cultivation resources, the trade with the Northern Territory and the Southern Territory, and now there were all kinds of trivial matters at the Orthodoxy Palace's branch sect. One person's energy was limited. After Hua Qing Sai broke through to the First Order Emperor realm, her cultivation had not increased until now because she had to deal with too many things. How could she have time to cultivate? Chapter 3364. Right now, the management of the High Heaven Palace had not yet matured. The strength of the 6 Monster Kings was enough, but they were Monster Kings after all. It was impossible to let them manage the High Heaven Palace. If they really did that, it would definitely be a mess. Right now, in the entire High Heaven Palace, The only one who could help her was the second chief steward, Bian Yuqing. Therefore, Hua Qing-sai would probably have to maintain her current state for a long time. Thinking of this, Yang Kai felt guilty. Hua Qing-sai was also a cultivator. Naturally, she would pursue the pinnacle of martial arts. Right now, she was distracted by so many trivial matters. It was really his fault. However, before he could open his mouth to speak, a crisp voice came from the side. "This beautiful big sister, what's your name?" Hua Qing-sai turned her head to look, only to discover that there was another person in the hall. It was a white and tender little fatty with an innocent face. His eyelashes were long, and his face was pink and tender, as if he was carved from gold. She immediately exclaimed and reached out a hand to pinch Yang Xiao's face. She giggled and said, "Where did this little guy come from?" Yang Xiao allowed her to pinch his face and smiled even more happily. "Big sister, you're so beautiful." "Sister Hua, don't be fooled by this stinking brat's innocence," Yang Kai shouted in his heart. Unfortunately, all women like to hear this kind of praise. Hua Qing-sai was stunned for a moment, then covered her mouth and laughed wildly. She pointed at Yang Xiao and said, "This little guy's mouth is really sweet." She turned to look at Yang Kai and asked, "Who is he?" "Palace master, where did you kidnap him from?" Yang Xiao giggled and said, "I'm father's son." Hua Qing-sai's laughter suddenly stopped. Her pair of beautiful eyes widened. She looked at Yang Xiao, then looked at Yang Kai, as if she wanted to see if there was anything in common between the two. However, no matter how she looked, there was nothing in common between the two. Yang Kai broke out in cold sweat. "Foster father, foster son." Hua Qing-sai exhaled and nodded. "I was wondering why he had such a big child in just a year. It turns out that he's an adopted son. If this was really his biological child, then the matter would be blown up. The palace master had 4 wives, and he hadn't had any children with the 4 wives yet. If he went out and had a child with someone else, how could that be? Foster father is also father. Father will always be this child's father," Yang Xiao said solemnly. Hearing this, Yang Kai felt relieved. Hua Qing-sai also said, "This little guy really knows how to talk. What's his name?" "Yang Xiao." Hua Qing-sai's expression suddenly became strange. She wondered if this boy was really Yang Kai's biological son. Otherwise, how could they even have the same surname? If he was an adopted son, his surname shouldn't be Yang Cai. However, she didn't care about this matter. The one with a headache would only be Yang Kai. She pinched Yang Xiao's little face and said, "Good name. They all say that a tiger father won't have a dog son. Your foster father is a dragon among men. In the future, your achievements won't be too bad." Yang Xiao laughed and said, "If foster father is a dragon among men, then I will become a real dragon." Hua Qing-sai praised, "Good ambition." However, she didn't know that Yang Xiao was really a dragon race. If she knew, she wouldn't know how she would feel. Changing the topic, Hua Qing-sai said, "By the way, palace master, an old man has come to the palace. He has a ferocious look on his face and has been wandering around the various peaks. The disciples have asked him who he is. It is said that he came back with you." "Him? Cheongqi." Yang Kai casually replied. "Cheongqi." Hua Qing-sai frowned, such a strange name. "Wait, Cheongqi?" Hua Qing-sai suddenly realized something. Her beautiful eyes widened as she looked at Yang Kai in astonishment and said, "Palace master, the Cheongqi you mentioned, is it a name or what?" Yang Kai smiled, "It's what you think." "Oh no." Hua Qing-sai's face changed. "What's wrong?" Yang Kai looked at her strangely. Hua Qing-sai's expression twitched. The disciples reported that the old man didn't look like a good person. "I sent a message to Monster King Xie to take a look. There shouldn't be any problems, right?" Yang Kai smiled. "The Monster King lives in the savage, desolate ancient lands all year round. They should be able to recognize Cheongqi's aura when facing several Saint Venerables, right?" As he spoke, he was a bit uncertain. "Let's send a message to the Monster King." Hua Qing-sai nodded and quickly took out a communication compass to contact Xie Wuwei. After a while, Hua Qing-sai wiped the cold sweat on her forehead. "Monster King Xie is fine." "Fine?" Yang Kai was stunned. Hua Qing Sai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Monster King Xie seemed to have said a few rude words, and then he was taught a lesson by Uncle Cheongqi. Now, Liu Yang and the other two monster kings have heard the news and are rushing over. That old man really knows how to cause trouble. Yang Kai couldn't help but roll his eyes. On a lush mountain peak, Xie Wuwei stood awkwardly beside Cheongqi. Cheongqi had his hands behind his back and looked forward with interest. Before coming here, although he knew that the High Heaven Palace had a good foundation and that there were many experts, he didn't expect it to be this strong. There were 3 monster king-level existences, and there were many others in the Emperor realm. However, these people were nothing in his eyes. What he really cared about was standing in front of him at this moment. There was a little girl who looked about 7 or 8 years old, wearing a fiery red dress. The aura of the Holy Spirit. This little girl actually had the aura of the Holy Spirit flowing on her body, and it was the aura of the Phoenix clan. There was actually a phoenix in the High Heaven Palace. Although Cheongqi was sure that if they really fought, this little girl in front of him definitely wouldn't be his opponent, both of their ages were obvious. He had been living in the era of the flowing time great emperors until now, and this girl was full of youthful vigor. Obviously, she hadn't reached her limit yet. A Phoenix clan, her future achievements would definitely be greater than his. Who are you? After looking at each other for a long time, Liu Yang opened her mouth and asked crisply. She also felt a strong pressure from this old guy in front of her. This was definitely one of the few strong enemies she had faced in her life. The last time she felt this kind of pressure was on Dragon Island. Cheongqi smiled slightly. Who is this little girl? Liu Yang's face darkened. I asked you first. Cheongqi laughed. You have to ask first. Xie Wuwei said, Miss Liu Yang, this is Cheongqi. I heard that he came back with the palace master. Cheongqi proudly clasped his hands behind his back. He originally wanted to see Liu Yang's reaction after hearing his name, but in the next instant, he saw Liu Yang's face blossom with a light of surprise. Master is back. Xie Wuwei nodded and said, the disciple guarding the spatial formation said that he saw the palace master. As soon as his voice fell, Liu Yang turned into a flame and disappeared from everyone's sight. Cheongqi's mouth twitched. He stared at Liu Yang's back and asked, the master that little girl mentioned, is the palace master here, Yang Kai? Xie Wuwei nodded and said, that's right. Is there a problem? Cheongqi's expression was very interesting. He thought to himself, what problem can there be? That guy is also my young master. He originally thought that it was really embarrassing for a dignified Holy Spirit to be forced to serve him as master, but now it seemed that the Phoenix clan called him master, so what was the point of him calling him young master? Moreover, many of the dragons on the Dragon Island were also very fond of him. He even had the dragon lady and adopted a dragon as his son. Compared to the dragons and phoenixes, a Cheongqi like him was really nothing. Liu Yang entered the palace and looked at Yang Kai with a smile. Master. Yang Kai nodded at her. Liu Yang is here. I heard that you came back, so I came over. Liu Yang smiled sweetly and walked to Yang Kai's side and looked up at him. Yang Kai patted her head and asked, did you see Cheongqi? Liu Yang nodded and said, I saw him. Did anything happen over there? No, it was just a small conflict. Since he was brought back by Master, then there's no problem. As she spoke, she suddenly sensed something and turned around, only to see Yang Xiao looking at her with wide eyes. They looked at each other and Yang Xiao grinned at her. She couldn't help but frown. Who are you? Me. My name is Yang Xiao, Soaring Heavens. Yang Xiao quickly explained. Yang Kai smiled and said, this is my adopted son. He will live in High Heaven Palace from now on. Xiao, this is Liu Yang, you can call her. Before she could finish, Yang Xiao cupped his hands and bowed. Xiao greets big sister Liu Yang. He really has a sweet mouth. He calls everyone big sister and is humble and polite. He has a good upbringing. The corners of Liu Yang's mouth curled up as she nodded lightly, ignoring Yang Xiao as she snuggled up to Yang Kai. Although Yang Kai didn't leave for long, there were so many people in the High Heaven Palace in the Southern Territory and the Northern Territory. Hua Qing Sai naturally had a lot to report. In the hall, Hua Qing Sai continued to talk, and Yang Kai asked a few questions from time to time. Gradually, he figured out the situation of the entire High Heaven Palace. After a while, Yang Kai suddenly said, "Liu Yang, take Xiaoer out for a walk. He will live here in the future. Let him familiarize himself with the environment first." The main reason was that Yang Xiao seemed to be very interested in Liu Yang. He kept walking around Liu Yang, looking for things to talk about, which distracted him a little. Yang Kai guessed that the little guy hadn't seen a child of his age since he was born, so he was very interested in Liu Yang. "Okay." Liu Yang nodded and waved to Yang Xiao. "Come with me." Yang Xiao immediately followed, smiling from ear to ear. Outside the hall, Yang Xiao followed Liu Yang like a tail and asked sweetly, "Big sister Liu Yang, where are we going now?" Liu Yang tilted her head and looked at him, revealing a faint smile. "I'll take you around." Okay. Yang Xiao kept nodding. Obviously, he didn't have any objections. Just as Yang Kai thought, he really hadn't met a child of his age since he was born. Now that he suddenly met one, he naturally wanted to get close to the other party. Yang Xiao followed Liu Yang to tour the mountains and rivers all the way. He felt that this place was much more fun than the Dragon Island. Not to mention the excitement, he also had a playmate to accompany him. He thought that it was a wise choice to follow his adoptive father. Chapter 3365. The only thing that made Yang Xiao a little dissatisfied was that this big sister Liu Yang seemed to be relatively taciturn. Even if he asked her 10 questions, he would only occasionally hear an answer. The rest of the time, he was basically ignored. In a valley full of blooming flowers, Liu Yang suddenly stopped. Yang Xiao also hurriedly stopped and turned his head to look at her. His eyes gradually bloomed with surprise. The valley scenery was beautiful, like a fairyland on earth. In the place full of blooming flowers, Liu Yang stood charmingly, like the most beautiful flower, making the whole world lose its brilliance. As the wind blew, thousands of white butterflies fluttered and turned into colorful light waves, making Liu Yang look more and more like a fairy in the world. Yang Xiao was dumbfounded. For the first time in his life, he really understood the meaning of the word beautiful. Suddenly, Liu Yang tilted her head and looked at him, saying lightly, "Now you should run away." Yang Xiao was looking at her in a daze. Hearing this, he was stunned and asked puzzledly, "Why should I run away?" Liu Yang slowly raised a hand and stretched out her index finger. With a whoosh, a flame bloomed on her fingertip. She said softly, "Because I will burn you with this thing." Yang Xiao was a little dumbfounded and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Sister Liu Yang, why do you want to burn me? Did I do something wrong?" Liu Yang didn't answer and just smiled at him. Then, under Yang Xiao's incredulous gaze, she gently pointed forward with her index finger. The flame on her fingertip suddenly turned into a fire snake as if it had a life of its own and wrapped around Yang Xiao. It happened so suddenly. Although Liu Yang had warned him, Yang Xiao didn't dare to believe that she would really burn him with fire. It wasn't until the fire snake came to his face that he woke up from a dream. He moved his body and rushed back more than 100 feet, shouting, "What are you doing? I didn't provoke you, did I? Why did you burn me with fire for no reason?" Yang Xiao even suspected that there was something wrong with Liu Yang's sister's brain. Liu Yang remained silent, still standing there elegantly, but with a single thought, the fire snake flew out and chased after Yang Xiao like it was an extension of her body. Yang Xiao's face changed as the heat wave hit him in the face. Although he felt that the fire snake did not have the power to kill him, if he was really burned, it would definitely not feel good. Although he hadn't been born for long and hadn't cultivated seriously, he was still a dragon after all, so he was able to dodge with great agility. For a time, the fire snake couldn't do anything to him. Although the fire serpents were ferocious, under Liu Yang's control, they didn't hurt the plants at all. From this, it could be seen that Liu Yang had precise control over the flames. Yang Xiao shouted as he dodged, "Sister Liu Yang, what are you doing? Quickly stop." Liu Yang did not pay attention to him. With a devilish smile on her face, she controlled the fire snake to chase after Yang Xiao. After a few times, Yang Xiao was infuriated. He cursed, "Crazy woman, are you crazy? We don't have any enmity between us. To a large extent, he inherited Yang Kai's character. Being teased by Liu Yang like this, he naturally became angry and became bold, so he spoke without thinking. What did you call me? Liu Yang narrowed her eyes, a pair of big eyes filled with cold air. Even her voice seemed to suddenly become the north wind blowing in the cold winter, which made Yang Xiao's hair stand on end when he heard it. Crazy woman? Liu Yang asked and answered herself. Suddenly, she nervously chuckled twice. Yang Xiao shouted in his heart. How could he dare to stay here? He saw an opportunity and flew to the side. Although he was a true dragon, he was born too recently. How could he be Liu Yang's opponent? The fire snake suddenly split and turned into a fire net to envelop him. Caught off guard, Yang Xiao was caught head-on by the fire net. Immediately, he screamed miserably and smoke rose from his body. The fire net was extremely hot. Although it did not have any lethality, it was still very uncomfortable to be burned by it. A high-pitched dragon roar sounded. Yang Xiao's body flashed with white light, and the dragon's breath filled the air, shattering the fire net. He flew away without looking back. He felt wronged. That sister Liu Yang is definitely crazy. I didn't provoke her, and I even politely called her, but she was actually willing to kill me. What kind of people are following foster father? I must run back and then expose this woman's true face in front of foster father. Foster father must be careful in the future. Run as fast as you can. I told you to run just now, but you didn't listen. Suddenly, a light voice came to his ears. Yang Xiao's little face suddenly turned green. He turned his head stiffly and saw the devil-like Liu Yang running side by side. She was obviously doing vicious things, but there was still a happy smile on her face, as if doing this could make her happy. This guy is really crazy. Ah! Yang Xiao screamed in horror. There was no longer any good impression of Liu Yang in his heart. All that was left was a strong fear. He just wanted to get as far away from her as possible. It would be best if they never met again in this life. While chasing and escaping, the two of them ran as fast as lightning, causing the disciples of the peaks to click their tongues in amazement. Yang Xiao asked for help, but the disciples of the peaks did not recognize him. When they saw that it was Liu Yang who was chasing him, how could they care about him? They only thought that this little fatty sneaked into the high heaven palace with bad intentions. From time to time, Liu Yang would release a fire snake. The fire snake was not enough to kill or even hurt people. It was just that the high temperature was unbearable. Yang Xiao was tortured to tears. He secretly hated that this crazy woman attacked at just the right time. Otherwise, he would have been injured and could have complained to foster father. He also wanted to escape back to Yang Kai, but he was chased by Liu Yang all the way. How could he recognize the way back? The high heaven palace covered a vast area. He ran and ran and ran and did not know where he ran to. In accordance with the principle that a wise man does not fight when the odds are against him, Yang Xiao begged for mercy. Liu Yang turned a deaf ear to him, making him extremely sad and angry. They rushed all the way into a spiritual mountain, startling countless people in the mountain. In the end, they attracted the attention of a charming woman. Beside the woman was a little girl who looked like she was carved out of jade. She was about 3 or 4 years old, about the same age as Yang Xiao. What's wrong? What's wrong? The woman held the little girl's hand and walked out of a stilt house. At a glance, she saw the scene of Liu Yang chasing Yang Xiao. She immediately asked in surprise. Yang Xiao rushed straight to the woman as if he had seen his savior. With snot and tears, he said, "Help, someone wants to kill me." Hearing this, the woman looked over and suddenly felt pain in her heart. The little fatty was in a very sorry state at the moment. His whole body was burnt black, and his hair was messy. He looked like a little beggar on the street. Behind him was a cold Liu Yang, and fire snakes were lingering around Liu Yang. Perhaps because the little fatty in front of her was about the same age as her daughter, the woman's motherly instinct was aroused. She protected him behind her and comforted him. "Don't be afraid, no one wants to kill you." She also saw that Liu Yang did not have any killing intent. She probably just wanted this little fatty to suffer a little. Otherwise, with Liu Yang's ability, How could this little brat still be alive? Looking at Liu Yang with some confusion, she asked, "What's going on?" Facing this woman whose cultivation was only in the first-order Dao source realm, Liu Yang behaved humbly and politely. She immediately withdrew her fire snakes and bowed gracefully. "Greetings, madam." In the entire High Heaven Palace, there was only one woman who could receive such courtesy from her, and that was Yang Kai's mother, Dong Suju. When Dong Suju was in Hengluo Starfield, she was only an origin king, but after coming to the star boundary, with the support of the huge resources of the High Heaven Palace, she naturally broke through to the Dao Source realm easily. With the improvement of her realm, she also became much younger. Now, she looked only 26 or 27 years old, and standing next to Yang Kai, it was not an exaggeration to say that they were siblings. Dong Suju was here, and the little girl she was holding was naturally Yang Shui, who had just been born a few years ago. The little girl was too young and had not yet begun to cultivate, but she was currently tempering her body. When the age was right, she would choose a secret art and begin to cultivate. With the huge background of the High Heaven Palace, her future achievements would not be bad. What did this little guy do wrong? Dong Suju looked at Liu Yang and asked. Liu Yang said lightly, "Nothing serious, he just said the wrong thing." Yang Xiao expressed his dissatisfaction and poked his head out from behind Dong Suju and shouted, "What did I say wrong?" Liu Yang glanced over, and Yang Xiao suddenly shivered and quickly shrank his head back. He was really afraid of this guy. Who would burn people as soon as they met? Was it just because he said the wrong thing? But after thinking about it, he felt that he did not say anything wrong. Dong Suju rebuked, "Children always make mistakes. Just scold them a little and it will be fine. Look at how pitiful they are. If their parents see this, they will feel distressed." Putting herself in his shoes, if Yang Kai or Yang Shui were tortured like this, she would definitely not be able to accept it. Liu Yang lowered his head and said obediently, "Yes." Dong Suju squatted down and, regardless of the dirt on the little fatty's face, used her sleeve to wipe his face. Suddenly, a tender little face was revealed, causing her to smile happily. "Little guy, you're quite good-looking. Where are your parents?" She thought this little fatty was from one of the spiritual peaks. Although most of the people in the High Heaven Palace came from the territory of the lower planes, there were too many of them. It was impossible for Dong Suju to know every single one of them. It was reasonable for such a little guy to be from one of the spiritual peaks. "My parents are in a place very far away." Finally, Yang Xiao knew that he couldn't easily reveal his background, so he gave a vague answer. When he said this, he couldn't help but feel a little sad. He actually missed his parents a little. The main reason was that he was scared of being tortured by Liu Yang. If he stayed on the Dragon Island, he would definitely be doted on by everyone. How could he be chased to the heavens and have no door to enter the earth? Dong Suju misunderstood and quickly stopped this topic. She changed the topic and asked, "What is your name?" Yang Xiao sniffed and replied miserably, "My name is Yang Xiao, the sky of the 9 heavens." Chapter 3366. Dong Suju was amused when she heard this. "Yang Xiao, what a good name. You have the same surname as my son." Yang Xiao asked in surprise, "Your son's surname is also Yang?" "That's right, my son's name is Yang Kai. He is the palace master of the High Heaven Palace. Since you are a disciple of the High Heaven Palace, you should know about him, right?" Dong Suju proudly introduced him. Although every time she saw Yang Kai, she would grumble a little, but in her heart, she was very proud of Yang Kai. He came to the star boundary alone and worked hard to build such a huge foundation like the High Heaven Palace. He even returned to the Hengluo Starfield and brought a large group of people here, letting 100,000 people enjoy the shade of his shadow. Such an achievement, not to mention that no one would be able to do it in the future, it was absolutely unprecedented. Yang Xiao's mouth opened so wide that an egg could be stuffed in. What? Did he hear wrongly? This woman was actually his adoptive father's mother. If it was just the same name, then it was fine, but the key was how many palace masters there were in the High Heaven Palace. No wonder that demon-like crazy woman was so polite to this woman, so that was the reason. "What's wrong?" Dong Suju observed his expression and looked at him curiously. She felt that there was something wrong with the little fatty in front of her. Yang Xiao hurriedly tidied up his clothes and casually wiped his face. He took a few steps back and respectfully bowed to Dong Suju, saying solemnly, "Grandson Yang Xiao greets grandmother." This time, it was Dong Suju's turn to be dumbfounded. Even Yang Shui, who was standing at the side, blinked her big eyes and looked at Yang Xiao in amazement. After a while, Dong Suju chuckled and rubbed Yang Xiao's head, saying, "Little guy, what are you shouting for?" Yang Xiao shook his head. "I didn't call you that. You are my grandmother. The palace master of the High Heaven Palace that you mentioned just now is my father." Dong Suju couldn't laugh anymore. Her expression twitched slightly. Yang Shui also showed a shocked expression. The little girl was young, but her mind was very agile. How could she not understand the meaning of these words? What's going on? Dong Suju turned his head and looked at Liu Yang. His divine sense surged as he quietly transmitted his voice. Is what he said true? His son actually had a son, but he didn't know about it. At this moment, Dong Suju was furious, but he couldn't show it in front of Yang Xiao, so he could only ask Liu Yang in private. Master said he's an adopted son. Liu Yang replied, he also brought him back from outside this time. Adopted son? Dong Suju couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. You scared me. I thought he was outside, although Dong Suju also hoped that Yang Kai could find a few more wives and give her a few grandchildren or something. The four of them hadn't made any moves yet. If they really had a son outside, the four of them would be in chaos. Since it was an adopted son, there was no problem. Suddenly, Dong Suju seemed to think of something. He turned around and rushed into the stilted house and disappeared. Yang Xiao was confused. There were only 3 little figures left. They looked at each other. After what happened just now, Yang Xiao was really afraid of Liu Yang. He could only look at Yang Shui and give her a flattering smile. Yang Shui put one hand on her waist and said in a childish voice, "Are you Big Brother's son?" Big Brother? Yang Xiao was stunned and immediately understood. "Oh, you are foster father's sister, right?" "Humph." Yang Shui snorted childish syllables. "You are Big Brother's son, and I am his sister. Then what should you call me?" "Call you what?" Yang Xiao looked confused. "How would I know what you should call me? Hurry up and call me something nice. I have something good for you." Yang Shui's pair of big eyes lit up. Yang Xiao couldn't help but twitch. He always felt that there was no normal person around his age in the High Heaven Palace. Liu Yang was like this, and so was the sister of foster father in front of him. When he was thinking this, he suddenly felt a heat wave in front of him. When he looked carefully, he saw a fire snake floating in front of him, quietly staring at him. "You want to burn me again?" Yang Xiao was shocked. Liu Yang walked towards him step by step with a sweet smile on her face. Her voice was incomparably gentle. "Think carefully. What should you call her?" Yang Xiao scratched his ears and cheeks and looked at the stilt house for help. Unfortunately, his grandmother, Master, had just entered and didn't come out. He wanted to run away, but he knew that he couldn't escape from Liu Yang's evil clutches. He could only painstakingly think. Finally, a light flashed in his mind. He looked at Yang Shui excitedly and said, "Aunt." Yang Shui blinked her big eyes and turned to look at Liu Yang. Liu Yang nodded slightly, indicating that he was right. Yang Shui immediately clapped and said, "Haha, correct. Tell me, what reward do you want?" Yang Xiao said weakly, "I don't want any reward. I just want to go back to foster father's side. The outside world is too dangerous." "Foster father, where are you?" "That won't do." Yang Shui shook her small head, her 2 braids swinging back and forth. She tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then, she walked to Yang Xiao's side, stood on tiptoe, and reached out her small hand to rub Yang Xiao's head. Her mouth was still softly muttering, "Yang Xiao is good, Yang Xiao is good, Yang Xiao is the best." The corners of Yang Xiao's mouth twitched as he looked at her. The little girl in front of him was not even as tall as him, but she dared to rub his head. He was a member of the dragon race. Who dared to rub his head? But thinking about it carefully, who told her to be his foster father's sister? His seniority was indeed lower than hers. He could only accept his fate. He smiled bitterly and said, "This is the reward." Young Shui nodded seriously. "Yes, mother always rewards Shuera like this." "Ha ha." Yang Xiao's temper was almost gone. "Auntie, you're really easy to satisfy." Yang Shui snorted and said angrily, "You should be happy." "Yes, yes, yes, I'm very happy." Yang Xiao nodded repeatedly. Liu Yang smiled from the side and said, "Do you know what you said wrong now?" As soon as she opened her mouth, Yang Xiao couldn't help but shiver. He swallowed his saliva and said, "What did I say wrong?" Liu Yang didn't answer. She just stared at him quietly. Yang Xiao had a bad feeling. He faintly felt that he had reached a critical moment. He realized that if he couldn't answer or if his answer didn't satisfy Liu Yang, his future would be very difficult. He immediately racked his brain, but he couldn't think of what he said wrong. He could only look at Liu Yang pitifully. "Can you give me a hint?" The corners of Liu Yang's mouth curled up as she looked at Yang Shui and said, "Shui, call me." Yang Shui immediately said crisply, "Sister Liu Yang. Do you understand now?" Liu Yang continued to look at Yang Xiao. "Yes, yes." Yang Xiao nodded fiercely, but he was roaring in his heart. "What do I understand? I call you Sister Liu Yang. Why do you want me to be burned by your fire?" "Wait." Yang Xiao suddenly seemed to realize something. He looked at Liu Yang timidly, and then carefully and tentatively said, "Liu Yang. Aunt." Liu Yang's face immediately bloomed with a smile like a spring breeze. She said to Yang Xiao, "From now on, I'm your elder aunt, and Shuer is your younger aunt. Do you remember?" Yang Xiao was dumbfounded. So that's what it was. It turned out that it was only because he called her elder aunt incorrectly at the beginning that he was chased by her fire. If that's the case, why didn't you say it earlier? Why did you have to let me understand it myself? How could I understand this kind of thing by myself? Yang Xiao was so angry that he wanted to bang his head on the ground and die. Yang Shui clapped her hands and said, "Yes, yes, I'm your younger aunt, and Sister Liu Yang is your elder aunt. We're family. Only a ghost would want to be your family." Suddenly, hurried footsteps came from the stilt house. Yang Xiao turned his head and saw Dong Suju and a middle-aged man walking over. At first glance, the middle-aged man looked somewhat similar to his adoptive father. Then, thinking of the intimate manner between him and Dong Suju, Yang Xiao immediately realized that this man was most likely his adoptive father. Fourth Master Yang was cultivating when he heard Dong Suju run over to him as if he was reporting good news. He was surprised that his son had adopted a white and chubby little boy. Naturally, he came out to see what was going on. Looking carefully, he found that it was indeed as Dong Suju said. The little boy's appearance was not bad, but he was a bit embarrassed. After looking at him for a while, he nodded and said, "Is this the child?" "Yang Xiao?" "Yes, that's him. He said that he came back with our son this time." Dong Suju nodded. Fourth Master Yang smiled slightly. Just as he was about to speak, Yang Xiao bowed to the ground and said, "Greetings to grandfather, master." This call of grandfather greatly comforted the fourth Master Yang. Although he was not his biological grandson, he was so sensible at such a young age. It could be seen that his upbringing was indeed good. He quickly raised his hand and said, stand up, stand up. Let me take a good look at you." Yang Xiao immediately straightened his posture and stood there meticulously, letting the fourth Master Yang examine him carefully. Fourth Master Yang smiled and nodded. "Not bad, not bad. Child, since you're ninth master's adopted son, why are you also surnamed Yang? Could it be that your family also has this surname?" Yang Xiao respectfully replied, "I was only able to be born because of Godfather's help, so I asked Godfather to give me a name as soon as I was born. That's why I took on Godfather's surname." Fourth Master Yang suddenly said, "Then your parents don't have any objections?" Yang Xiao smiled. "No objections. That's good." Fourth Master Yang smiled and nodded. Suddenly, his eyes widened. "You were born not long ago? Child, how old are you this year?" Yang Xiao said shyly, "I was born in January or February." January or February. Dong Suju and Fourth Master Yang were stunned. Liu Yang said, "He's not human. He seems to be of the dragon race. As a holy spirit, Liu Yang could naturally feel the dragon breath on Yang Xiao. Dragon race. Fourth Master Yang and his wife were shocked. As far as they knew, Yang Kai had an unclear relationship with a dragon race girl. Last time, he seemed to have gone to Dragon Island as well. This time, he came back with a adopted son of the dragon race who also had the surname Yang. Could it be, where's the little brat? Dong Suju asked with a straight face. Liu Yang said, he's talking to the head chief. Dong Suju scoffed. Tell him to come see me immediately. Chapter 3367. After being summoned, Yang Kai naturally hurriedly ran to the spirit peak where his parents lived to greet them. After much persuasion, he finally dispelled their misunderstanding and let them know that Yang Xiao was really just his adopted son, not his biological son. Dong Suju's expression became much better, and she earnestly advised, Old Nine, you're not young anymore. Now that you've established a firm foothold in the astral boundary, if you really want to have a child, Mother won't oppose it. In fact, I'm very supportive of it, but you can't mess around outside. There are 4 girls at home, you can have a child with any of them, understand? I know, I won't mess around. Yang Kai repeatedly nodded. When he said this, he couldn't help but think of Ji Yaro, and inexplicably feel guilty. Dong Suju saw that he was being perfunctory and couldn't help but sigh. Forget it, I see that you don't have this idea in the short term. You've been running around outside all year round, and it's not suitable for Xiao to follow you all the time. Let him live with me, and he can accompany Shui. What do you think? Yang Kai heard this and thought for a moment, then nodded, that's fine. With his mother taking care of Yang Xiao, he naturally didn't have anything to worry about. However, he had to ask for Yang Xiao's opinion on this matter. If he didn't agree, then there was nothing he could do. He called Yang Xiao in and told him about this matter. Yang Xiao naturally didn't have any objections and immediately agreed. He could see that if he stayed with his grandmother, he could enjoy her protection, but if he followed Yang Kai, then he might be tortured by Liu Yang's eldest aunt. She was simply a demon, and if she didn't agree with him, she would burn him with fire. Yang Kai was very surprised by this, and thought that it was difficult to understand a child's mind. After this matter was settled, Yang Xiao stayed with Dong Suju. Whether it was the High Heaven Palace in the Northern Territory or the Orthodoxy Palace in the Southern Territory, they were all peaceful recently. Yang Kai didn't plan to go out for a short time after returning this time. He was ready to go into seclusion and digest the harvest of the past few days. Since he came back from the astral boundary, he had been running around non-stop and didn't have much time to cultivate. On the path of a cultivator, he had to cut through all obstacles and bravely move forward. It was rare for him to have free time, so he naturally couldn't waste it. But before that, there were still some trivial matters to deal with. At the very least, he had to ask about his women. Yang Kai first went to Spirit Pill Peak to find Xia Ningchang and accompanied her for a day and a night, which made Ji Ying very unhappy. Xia Ningchang was now the last disciple of the wondrous Pill Great Emperors. Although they didn't have the status of master and disciple, Ji Ying was the one who taught her. Xia Ningchang's talent in alchemy was praised by the wondrous Pill Great Emperors. They once said that if she had the opportunity, her future achievements would definitely not be lower than Ji Ying's. This was the second of the wondrous Pill Great Emperors. Yang Kai came to waste Xia Ningchang's time, so it would be strange if Ji Ying was happy. Although he usually got along well with Yang Kai, when it came to the future achievements of his little junior sister, Ji Ying didn't dare to be careless. He was afraid that he would fail to live up to Xia Ningchang's talent. After Xia Ningchang, it was Shuiyu's turn to accompany her for a day and a night. Then, he casually set off to Ice Heart Valley to find Su Yang and dual cultivate with her. Before leaving, he couldn't help but sneak around with Ji Yaro, which was quite exciting. Returning to High Heaven Palace and standing in front of the space array, Yang Kai hesitated for a long time, but in the end, he sighed and decided not to go to the ancient wild lands. If he really went to find that dragon lady again, his body wouldn't be able to bear it. For the first time, he discovered that having more women wasn't necessarily a good thing. From today onwards, He announced that he would enter secluded retreat and was not to be disturbed unless something major happened. Inside High Heaven Peak's palace, Yang Kai sat cross-legged. With a wave of his hand, a large number of high-rank source crystals were scattered around. Circulating his emperor chi, the high-rank source crystals exploded one by one, and the world energy stored inside them dissipated, turning the entire room into a sea of world energy in an instant. As source crystals were constantly thrown out, world energy filled the room. The world energy in the room gradually turned into a mist, so thick that it was almost visible to the naked eye. Only then did Yang Kai silently circulate his secret art, cultivating while comprehending the various gains he had gained from Dragon Island. In the Dragon Temple, the dragon souls of the dragon race's great elders had imparted many dragon race secret techniques to him. Each secret technique had great power and had their own uses. However, even though Yang Kai had obtained these secret techniques, if he wanted to use them, he would need to have his own understanding and comprehension of each secret technique. This wasn't something that could be done overnight, and it required constant experimentation and experimentation. Spring passed and autumn came, and flowers bloomed and withered. When one's cultivation reached the Emperor realm, it was common for them to enter secluded retreat for a few years, or even 100 years, not to mention that Yang Kai had already reached the second-order Emperor realm. If he wanted to make another breakthrough, he would need the accumulation of time. During this period, he would occasionally come out of seclusion to check on the situation in the High Heaven Palace and see if anything major had happened. Fortunately, the High Heaven Palace was managed by Hua Qing Sai, so everything was in order, giving him enough time to improve his cultivation and strength. One day, 2 years later, Yang Kai, who was swallowing world energy like a whale, suddenly frowned. He took a deep breath, slowly stopped cultivating, and opened the barrier around the room. Hua Qing Sai quickly walked in from outside and cupped his fists. "Palace Master. What's the matter?" Before he entered seclusion, he had ordered that no one should disturb him unless there was something major. Now that Hua Qing Sai had triggered the barrier outside, it was obvious that something had happened. "Someone from the Southern Territory has come, saying that they have an urgent matter to discuss with Palace Master." "Who?" "Elder Gao Shueting, and Elder Xiao Yuyang of Star Soul Palace." Yang Kai was surprised. They came together. If Gao Shueting came to look for him, Yang Kai might not be too surprised. After all, he was also a guest elder of Azure Sun Temple. What was Xiao Yuyang doing here? Yes. Hua Qing Sai nodded slightly with a complicated look on her face. Speaking of which, she was originally a disciple of Star Soul Palace, and her master was one of the elders of Star Soul Palace. However, her master, Tan Jun Hao, was not very reliable. For his own interests, he could even sacrifice his disciple. In the end, he was killed by Yang Kai. Since then, Hua Qing Sai left Star Soul Palace and joined the High Heaven Palace. Now that she saw Xiao Yuyang as the chief steward of the High Heaven Palace, she couldn't help but feel a little strange. "Did he say anything?" Yang Kai asked. Hua Qing Sai shook her head. "He didn't say anything, but it seems that the situation is not good. Invite them to the main hall, I will come later," Yang Kai ordered. Hua Qing Sai accepted the order and left. Yang Kai sat on the ground and rubbed his chin for a while. He couldn't figure out the purpose of these two people's visit, so he simply got up and went to meet them directly. Inside the main hall, Gao Shueting and Xiao Yuyang were sitting and standing. Gao Shueting's expression was cold and indifferent, but Xiao Yuyang's expression was a little anxious, looking up from time to see if Yang Kai had come. It was difficult to see such a situation on someone of his cultivation. After all, Xiao Yuyang was a third-layer Emperor Realm Master and was one of the elders of the Southern Territory's Overlord sect. Even if a mountain collapsed in front of him, he would not bat an eyelid. Seeing him so anxious showed that the situation was not optimistic. Fortunately, Yang Kai did not make them wait long and came to the main hall after a little tidying up. Seeing him appear, Gao Shueting just nodded lightly, but Xiao Yuyang hurriedly greeted him. "Yang Kai." "Elder Xiao." Yang Kai cupped his fists and nodded to Gao Shueting as a greeting before asking, "What is the matter with the two of you coming to my High Heaven Palace?" Xiao Yuyang got straight to the point and said, "Please save someone." "Who?" Kai Yang furrowed his brow, thinking that it couldn't have been that little brat Xiao Chen who had met with an accident. If that smelly brat really had met with an accident, then Kai Yang wouldn't necessarily be in the mood to save him. That little brat had always disliked him, so of course Kai Yang also disliked him. However, since Xiao Yuyang had personally come forward, shouldn't he give him some face? Just as he was thinking this, he heard Xiao Yuyang say, "Princess Lanzun." Yang Kai was startled. What happened to Princess Lanzun? Xiao Yuyang said with a gloomy expression, "Princess Lanzun has been captured." Yang Kai was stunned when he heard this and looked at Xiao Yuyang with a strange expression, as if he had not heard wrong. He then turned to look at Jiao Shueting and saw her nod at him. Only then did he know that Xiao Yuyang was telling the truth. Lanzun had been captured. Who would be so bold as to capture Lanzun? She was the pearl of the great emperor's Mingyu, and Lanzun's cultivation was not low either. She had broken through to the emperor realm a long time ago, and although she was only a first order, she seemed to have inherited the special physique of the great emperor's Mingyu. Her true combat power was not something a first-order emperor realm cultivator could compare to. She definitely had a life-saving artifact given to her by the great emperor's Mingyu. If someone wanted to capture her, they would need to be at least a third-order emperor realm cultivator. Which guy ate the heart of a bear or the heart of a leopard? Thinking about it, Yang Kai's heart suddenly jumped as he remembered something from 2 years ago. This sounds familiar. How could it be so coincidental? Faintly, Yang Kai smelled an ominous aura and hesitated for a moment before asking, "Do you know who did it?" Xiao Yuyang said with a solemn expression, "I have some guesses, but I'm not sure." Yang Kai said, "Since you have some guesses, then just do it." "What about the great emperors?" Lanzun was captured, so the great emperors can't just sit back and do nothing, right? Why are you looking for me for this? Although he was strong, he was still just a second-order emperor realm cultivator. Star Soul Palace was a big place. Not to mention the great emperors, they even had several third-order emperors, so it was impossible to rule out the existence of a hidden fake emperor. Yang Kai could not figure out why Xiao Yuyang wanted to go so far away. Xiao Yuyang pondered for a moment before asking, "Do you still remember what happened at Orthodoxy Temple?" Yang Kai said, "Of course I don't forget. It happened 3 years ago, so how could he not remember? But why bring it up all of a sudden?" Xiao Yuyang said, "What happened at Orthodoxy Temple back then could be said to be related to the safety of the entire Southern Territory. Logically speaking, the great emperors should have appeared, but in the end, the great emperors did not appear. Do you know why?" Hearing him say this, Yang Kai also found it strange. He had also found it strange back then. The incident at Orthodoxy Temple was so big, but the great emperors did not appear. Only a few elders from Star Soul Palace came to deal with it, which was obviously somewhat unreasonable. Chapter 3368. At that time, what Xiao Yuyang said was that the great emperors had already set off for Orthodoxy Temple, but after hearing that the matter had been resolved halfway, they returned home. No one questioned this statement, but now it seemed that the truth was not so. At that time, Princess Lanzun had already disappeared. The great emperors have been tracking down the princess's whereabouts, so the great emperors have no idea what happened in Orthodoxy Temple, Xiao Yuyang explained with a heavy expression. Princess Lanzun disappeared at that time? Yang Kai was shocked, wondering why he hadn't seen Lanzun at the Southern Territory's martial meet. Although it was a little strange at the time, he didn't think much about it, but now he understood the reason and frowned. So, the great emperors have not been in Star Soul Palace for the past few years? Otherwise, it would have been impossible for the great emperors not to have heard about Orthodoxy Temple after so long. Yes. Xiao Yuyang nodded. Her Highness the Princess is the only relative of the great emperors, so naturally, the great emperors are anxious about her disappearance, so they have been tracking down clues. This matter can only be done in secret and cannot be announced to the public. Yang Kai nodded in understanding. The daughter of the great emperors had been captured, so if they searched for her openly, it would give someone an opportunity to take advantage of the situation or anger the person who had captured her. If Lanzun was killed to silence her, it would be over. It wasn't until a year ago that Star Soul Palace received a message from the great emperors, but the message was incomplete. It seemed that the great emperors had sent it back in a hurry, or it had been interfered with. We followed the map and found a suspicious place, but we couldn't enter. Why? Young Kai asked curiously. Star Soul Palace's masters had all been dispatched, so where in this world could they not enter? It seems to be an independent world, and no one can enter without the corresponding method to open it. Yang Kai showed a look of understanding. So you came to me. Xiao Yuyang sighed. You are proficient in space principles, so maybe you have a way to enter. Yang Kai nodded, indicating that he understood. If that place was really an independent world, then finding him was definitely the best and only way. Where are the great emperors now? Yang Kai asked again. Xiao Yuyang slowly shook his head. After sending that message, the great emperors have not responded. Yang Kai was shocked. Even the great emperors did not respond. Could it be that the odds were against him? But that was impossible. Who in this world could threaten the great emperors? But if he used Lan Xun to threaten him? Yang Kai shook his head secretly. He was not sure if the great emperors of the Bright Moon Empire would surrender because of their love for their daughter if they were really threatened by Lan Xun. The key was, who could catch him? This matter was a little too big. As if seeing through his thoughts, Xiao Yuyang said, the great emperor's divine technique is vast, so you don't need to worry too much. The lack of response may be due to some delay, or perhaps he has already entered that independent world. Yang Kai, I heard that you have a good personal relationship with Her Highness, so this time, I must ask you to help her. At the very least, you must open that world and let my Star Soul Palace's people go in and search. Yang Kai nodded. I also owe Her Highness a debt of gratitude. Since she is in trouble, I naturally cannot stand by and do nothing. Hearing this, Xiao Yuyang was overjoyed. He was worried that Yang Kai would refuse, but now it seemed that he was a warm-hearted person. But there is one thing I am curious about. Yang Kai suddenly changed the topic. Speak. Perhaps because Yang Kai readily agreed, Xiao Yuyang's attitude towards him became much more cordial. As Elder Xiao said, Her Highness disappeared 3 years ago. The great emperors also began to investigate 3 years ago and sent back a message a year ago. Why did you only come to find me now? It was not a secret that he could arrange space arrays in the Southern Territory. Azure Sun Temple and High Heaven Palace were connected by space arrays, so there was no reason for it to take a year. Xiao Yuyang sighed. You may not know, but that place is very far from the Southern Territory. Even if we flew, it would take at least half a year. Half a year. Yang Kai's expression changed. In another territory? Western Territory, Xiao Yuyang said solemnly. Yang Kai suddenly understood. So that place was in the Western Territory. It would indeed take a lot of time to go back and forth. No wonder it took a year to find him. Speaking of the Western Territory, Yang Kai had some resentment. When he returned from the reincarnation world, he had been to the Western Territory and met the little girl Lin Yun. They had caused a big ruckus in a big sect in the Western Territory. Later, he arranged a space array to take her back to the High Heaven Palace, but who knew that the space array would be destroyed at the critical moment, causing him to be the only one to return while Lin Yun was left behind in the Western Territory. Although Yang Kai did not see the person who did it, he felt that it should be the Iron Blood Great Emperor. If not for this, it would have been convenient to go to the Western Territory. Now, if he wanted to go there, he would have to fly, which would waste a lot of time. There's no time to lose. Yang Kai, if you don't have anything else to deal with, let's go now, Xiao Yuyang said anxiously. Things had been delayed for too long and he did not know if there were any changes over there, so he was eager to take Yang Kai to have a look. Yang Kai nodded and said, okay. While speaking, he took out his communication artifact and sent a message to Hua Qing Sai, telling her that he was going out and that his return date was uncertain. Hua Qing Sai was also used to his style of coming and going without a trace, so she naturally had nothing to say. The three of them immediately set off and teleported back to Azure Sun Temple through the space array. Then, Xiao Yuyang directly summoned a 2-story flying boat and invited Yang Kai to board before flying away. It seemed that he really did not want to delay for a moment. Gao Shueting did not follow. She was just taking Xiao Yuyang to the High Heaven Palace. Without her lead, Xiao Yuyang could not use the space array of Azure Sun Temple, so she had nothing to do with this trip to the Western Territory. The speed of the flying boat was very fast. Xiao Yuyang almost disregarded the consumption and hurried on with all his might. After all, this matter was related to the great emperors and Princess Lanzun, so he was also eager to know the truth. On the deck, Yang Kai stood with his hands behind his back and carefully asked Xiao Yuyang about the ins and outs of this matter, but he did not get more information. He only knew that they followed the information sent back by the great emperors and found a place where a sealed world existed, but there was no way to open it, so they went to find Yang Kai. Hearing this, Yang Kai nodded, took out a jade slip from his space ring, and poured information into it. Immediately after, with a flick of his finger, the jade slip shook slightly and disappeared. Xiao Yuyang raised his brow. Space beacon? Yang Kai looked at him in surprise. Elder Xiao actually knows this little trick. Xiao Yuyang said, the great emperors used this method to communicate. I heard that this method was created by Spirit Beast Island's Li Wuyi. Back then, the great emperors went to Spirit Beast Island and asked for something from Li Wuyi. I didn't expect you to know it too. Yang Kai smiled. I also learned it from Senior Li. Xiao Yuyang was surprised. You met Li Wuyi? Yang Kai nodded. 2 years ago, I went to the Eastern Territory and had the honor of discussing the Tao of Space with him. Xiao Yuyang suddenly understood. Yes, you can arrange a space array that can cross territory, so it's convenient for you to travel between different territories. In that case, you can freely travel between the Eastern, Southern, and Northern territories of the star boundaries 4 territories. What about the Western Territory? Yang Kai's mouth twitched. I could have, but the space array I arranged was destroyed. Xiao Yuyang was amused. Who would be so bored as to destroy your space array? Yang Kai smiled and did not answer. However, this time, he happened to be going to the Western Territory, so he could arrange a space array there. In the future, he could really travel between the 4 territories at will. Who did you send a message to just now? Xiao Yuyang asked curiously. Li Wuyi. Senior Li. Yang Kai did not hide it from him. There is one thing that Elder Xiao may not know. 2 years ago, on the eastern sea of the Eastern Territory, Yarrow Lin, the daughter of the Serene Soul Great Emperors, was also captured. What? Xiao Yuyang was shocked when he heard this. The daughter of the Serene Soul Great Emperors was also captured. Lanzun's incident happened about 3 years ago, while Yarrowlin's incident happened 2 years ago. Although there was a difference of 1 year between them, it was not that long. Moreover, one was in the Eastern Territory, while the other was in the Southern Territory. If the difference in territory was taken into account, could it be the same person? Xiao Yuyang suddenly thought of a possibility. I'm not sure about that, but the person who captured Yarrow Lin at that time was a fake emperor. A fake emperor. Xiao Yuyang sucked in a breath of cold air. Although he was now a 3rd-layer Emperor Realm Master, he was still no match for a fake emperor, so he calmly asked, how do you know so much? Chem. You just said that I went to the Eastern Territory 2 years ago, and Yarrow Lin was also captured 2 years ago. Could it be? Yes, I was also there when Yarrow Lin was captured. Yang Kai nodded, confirming his guess. Now that 2 years have passed, I want to ask Senior Li if there is any new information. Xiao Yuyang nodded. I should ask. If it was the same person who did it, then this person is too bold. What does he want to do? Yang Kai grinned meaningfully. You'll have to ask that old man himself. As he spoke, the space spirit bead on his wrist released a spatial fluctuation, and a jade slip suddenly appeared in front of him. Yang Kai reached out and grabbed it, his divine sense surging as he immersed himself in it to investigate. After a while, his face became solemn. How is it? Xiao Yuyang asked anxiously. Elder Xiao, take a look at it yourself. Yang Kai reached out and threw the jade slip to him. Xiao Yuyang took it and checked it, and after a while, his face changed drastically. How could this be? The disciples and descendants of many great emperors have disappeared. This, who could have done this? The great emperors had many connections with each other, and with the space beacons created by Li Wuyi, it was convenient to send and receive information, so Spirit Beast Island had much more information than Star Soul Palace. According to Li Wuyi's reply, after Yarrow Lin disappeared, Serene Soul Palace's cultivator went out in full force to search the Eastern Territory, but in the end, they found nothing. Yarrow Lin seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. Since their daughter was missing, the Serene Soul Great Emperors were naturally very concerned, so they sent a message to several Great Emperors on good terms, asking them to keep an eye out. Chapter 3369. Who would have thought that this message would reveal a piece of horrifying news? Many of the descendants and disciples of the Great Emperors had gone missing, and all of them had happened in the past 2 to 3 years. This matter involved 4 or 5 Great Emperors. In addition to the Serene Soul and Bright Moon that young Kai already knew, there were also the Great Emperors of Heaven's Revelations, the Great Emperors of Flower Shadow, and the Iron Blood Great Emperor. Lin Yun was also missing. Whether the other Great Emperors had descendants or disciples that had gone missing, Spirit Beast Island did not know for the time being. After all, not every Great Emperors had space beacons to communicate with each other. However, judging from the current situation, it was likely that these 5 Great Emperors were not the only ones whose disciples or descendants had gone missing. There might be even more. The others were fine, but what worried young Kai the most was Lin Yun. He had not seen her since they parted ways in the Western Territory, but he did not expect to hear news of her again because of this. Exchanging a glance with Xiao Yuyang, they could see the shock in each other's eyes. Although they didn't know who did it, both of them had a vague feeling that an invisible black hand was covering the entire astral boundary. These missing descendants or disciples of the Great Emperors were scattered across the various territory of the star boundary, so anyone with such courage and ability was definitely not an ordinary person. It was very likely that this person was from some huge hidden organization. However, what young Kai could not understand was what the purpose of this person behind this was. The Great Emperors were the strongest existences in this world, so what good would it do to offend them? After a long silence, young Kai suddenly spoke. Elder Xiao, you said before that you had some guesses about who had taken Princess Lanzun away, but you were not sure. May I ask who you think is behind this? Xiao Yuyang pondered for a moment before replying. Originally, we guessed that it was the Shadow Kill Hall who had done something. Assassin Hall. Young Kai raised an eyebrow. Of course, he was no stranger to the name of the Assassin Hall. It was the overlord sect of the Western Territory, the force of the Night Shadow Great Emperors. However, this force was extremely mysterious, just like the Night Shadow Great Emperors themselves. Even the cultivator of the Western Territory had no idea where the Assassin Hall was located. All he knew was that there was such a behemoth in the Western Territory, but it was extremely difficult to pinpoint its exact location. Because the information sent back by the Great Emperors pointed to the Western Territory? Young Kai asked. This was a reasonable guess. Daring to lay hands on the daughter of Great Emperors could only be done by another Great Emperor, and the message sent back by the Great Emperors Ming Yu pointed to a certain place in the Western Territory, which made Xiao Yuyang and the others think of something. Hearing what he said, Xiao Yuyang shook his head and said, "This is only one of the reasons, there are other reasons." "Oh, I'd like to hear the details." Xiao Yuyang said, "You may not know, but the one in the Western Territory has always been at odds with our master. The two of them have been entangled with each other ever since they were young." Young Kai asked in surprise, "Why is that?" "It's just a struggle for the Great Tao." Since Xiao Yuyang had already spoken, he had no intention of hiding it anymore. Think about the titles of these two master. Young Kai frowned and muttered, "Ming Yu, Night Shadow." After muttering a few times, a look of understanding suddenly appeared on his face. Under the bright moon, everything is revealed. Nothing can hide. How can there be a shadow of the night? These two lords are on opposite sides. If one represents light, then the other represents darkness. Young Kai frowned. If there is no light, then how can there be darkness? Xiao Yuyang was startled when he heard this, but he soon burst out laughing. "You should tell this to the two master and see what they think." Young Kai's expression twitched as he waved his hand. "I'm just speaking casually, but since Elder Xiao originally guessed that Her Highness' disappearance was caused by the Shadow Kill Hall, did you not go to the Shadow Kill Hall to ask for her?" Xiao Yuyang sighed. "In this world, I'm afraid that only the Great Emperors know the location of the Shadow Kill Hall, so how could I possibly know where it is?" Besides, if it was really the Shadow Kill Hall who did it, then it means that they want to make a move against my Starsoul Palace. If we really went there, wouldn't we be walking right into a trap? Although I originally had this guess, it was because of the relationship between the two master, but now, it seems that someone is deliberately trying to frame the Shadow Kill Hall. Yang Kai nodded slightly. If Lan Xun was the only one missing, then this guess might be true, but there were too many Great Emperors involved. Even if the Great Emperor's Night Shadow and Bright Moon Great Emperors were not on good terms, they would not involve others in this quarrel. Of course, a guess is still a guess, and we can't rule out this possibility. After all, the final clue is that it is in the Western Territory. As for the truth, perhaps we can only find out if we find Her Highness and the others. Yang Kai nodded, and the two fell silent for a while. Xiao Yuyang was worried about Lan Xun's safety and the whereabouts of the Great Emperors, while Yang Kai was worried about Lin Yun. He did not know if the little girl was also on this trip. If she was, then things would be easy, and he could save her along the way, but if she was not, in this vast star boundary, where could he find her? The Iron Blood Great Emperor should know about this, so young Inflammation should also know about it. Would they make any moves? The flying boat moved as fast as lightning, and under Xiao Yuyang's urging, its speed reached its limit. However, even if he was a third-order Emperor Realm Master, he could not support such a long period of continuous operation. Fortunately, Yang Kai was helping him, and after he let go of the control of the flying boat, the two of them took turns to drive it forward. When one of them rested, the other would travel at full speed, so there was no delay. The journey was long, and Yang Kai took the opportunity to cultivate intermittently for a few days. In his spare time, he would discuss various cultivation experiences with Xiao Yuyang. Xiao Yuyang was a third-order Emperor Realm cultivator, and as the saying goes, a stone from a mountain can be used to polish jade, so the two of them had a lot to gain. 2 months later, the two arrived at the Western Territory, and it was no longer suitable to use the flying boat to fly with great fanfare. According to Xiao Yuyang, because the relationship between the Great Emperor's Bright Moon and Night Shadow Great Emperors was not good, Starsoul Palace and Shadow Killer Hall were like fire and water. Therefore, the people from Starsoul Palace entered the Western Territory stealthily to avoid being found out and causing trouble for no reason. After getting off the flying boat, the two of them disguised themselves before flying off. They did not speak a word along the way, flying and stopping, occasionally searching for mountains and rivers to rest for a while before continuing on. It was not until nearly 5 months later that Xiao Yuyang pointed to a sea of sand in front of them. "We've arrived, it's in that sea of sand." Yang Kai was shocked when he heard this. These past few months of non-stop travel had exhausted him. His body could still bear it, but the main thing was that he was mentally repulsed by it. Ever since he was able to arrange space arrays, he spent most of his time shuttling back and forth through them. Occasionally, he would have to travel, but he would not have to travel for several months at a time. This journey had been very torturous, but now that he heard that they had arrived at their destination, he felt inexplicably happy. "We've finally arrived." The two of them shot into the sea of sand one after the other, and in the blink of an eye, they were surrounded by sand and disappeared from sight. Compared to the other territories of the star boundary, the Western Territory's landscape was generally more desolate. Seas of sand and broken rocks could be seen almost everywhere, and there were very few spirit mountains or rivers. However, it was also because of this that the cultivator of the Western Territory was so valiant. In this vast sea of sand, one could not see the end of it at a glance. When the wind blew, sand and dust would fly everywhere, making it impossible to see anything within 3 meters. Moreover, the scenery within a 10,000-kilometer radius was the same, without a single point of reference. Even a cultivator with low cultivation could get lost and be trapped in this sea of sand, not to mention that there were many unpredictable dangers in this sea of sand. Even those from the Emperor realm could lose their lives here if they were not careful. After Yang Kai entered this sea of sand with Xiao Yuyang, he immediately realized the ruthlessness of nature. When the wind blew, grains of sand the size of grains of sand would hit him head-on, slamming into his protective emperor chi and making a cracking sound. Sweeping the area with his divine sense, there was almost no aura of life within the range of his perception. There were only a few monster beasts that struggled to survive in this harsh environment. 2 days later, the two of them passed by an oasis-like place. Yang Kai called out to Xiao Yuyang and flew down with him. Xiao Yuyang looked travel-worn and asked suspiciously, "What's wrong?" Yang Kai glanced at him and said, "Elder Xiao, you haven't rested for a long time, you should rest." Xiao Yuyang frowned and said, "We're almost there, it won't be too late to rest after we get there." Yang Kai shook his head, "Let's rest. I'll take this opportunity to arrange a space array here. You don't want us to fly all the way back, do you?" Hearing this, Xiao Yuyang nodded and said, "All right, then I'll have to trouble you." Yang Kai waved his hand and began to observe the oasis. This was no longer an oasis, or rather, it used to be an oasis, but the water source had dried up and the trees had withered, leaving only a rudimentary oasis. However, compared to the sand-filled desert, this was Yang Kai's only choice to arrange a space array. After all, he couldn't arrange a space array in the middle of a desert. If he really did so, the space array would be buried by the sandstorm within a few days. Although the water source in this place had dried up, since it had existed for so long, it meant that it wouldn't disappear anytime soon, so it was best to use it to arrange a space array. This time, Yang Kai couldn't care less about hiding it. In any case, his space array could only be activated with the transmission token he had specially refined, so it wouldn't matter even if it was discovered. The only thing he had to worry about was that it would be destroyed. Choosing a place with a relatively solid foundation, Kai Yang began to work. After working for most of the day, a brand new space array was formed. After carefully inspecting it and confirming that it could connect to the various space arrays he had arranged before, Yang Kai breathed a sigh of relief. On the other side, Xiao Yuyang noticed the movement and opened his eyes, asking, "Is it done?" Yang Kai nodded. Xiao Yuyang walked over and observed the space array for a while, praising, "You've done so much in just half a day." If this Xiao hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it. Practice makes perfect. Yang Kai smiled lightly and tossed a transmission token to him. Chapter 3370. This is. Xiao Yuyang looked at the transmission token in his hand suspiciously. After Yang Kai explained the purpose of this thing, Xiao Yuyang immediately put it away as if he had obtained a precious treasure. With this thing, it would be much more convenient for him to travel between places in the future. He could freely travel through any space array arranged by Yang Kai. "When you have time, come to my Star Soul Palace and arrange a space array." Xiao Yuyang looked at him with a smile. Yang Kai nodded and said, "No problem." He had already planned to use space arrays to connect various places in the star boundary, so arranging one at Star Soul Palace would be a piece of cake. After this matter was agreed upon, the two set off again. After another 3 days, they finally arrived at their destination. As Xiao Yuyang landed in a desert, Yang Kai looked at a certain spot in front of him in amazement. 1,000 meters in front of him, a huge pit had appeared in the endless sea of sand. This pit was at least a dozen square meters in radius and several dozen meters deep. If one looked down from above, this pit looked like a huge funnel embedded in this sea of sand. The funnel was constantly rotating, and a large amount of sand rolled down to the bottom, disappearing without a trace. Yang Kai was amazed. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed that such a strange sight could exist in this world. Yang Kai didn't know how this funnel was formed or how long it had been in existence, but he could feel traces of space force fluctuations coming from the bottom of this funnel. Focusing his vision, Yang Kai discovered that the bottom of this funnel seemed to be connected to an unknown location. Is this the independent entrance to the world that Xiao Yuyang mentioned? Yang Kai took a closer look and found that this was indeed the case. There should be a void corridor at the bottom of the funnel, and although he didn't know where it led to, it was obviously in a sealed state. If one didn't know how to open this void corridor, let alone enter it, it would be impossible to open it. If he used brute force rashly, it was very likely that he would destroy this void corridor, making it difficult to enter. No wonder Xiao Yuyang didn't hesitate to run back to the Southern Territory from the Western Territory and ask Jiao Shui Ting to take him to High Heaven Palace to find me. With the current situation, it is indeed more appropriate for me to deal with it. Noticing the arrival of Yang Kai and Xiao Yuyang, the hidden figures gradually revealed themselves and gathered around. Yang Kai looked over and found that they were all familiar faces. Shui Zhengmao and Lei Hong, the two third-layer Emperor Realm Masters, were also present, and with the addition of Xiao Yuyang, the three great emperors of Star Soul Palace were all present. In addition, there were also a dozen or so cultivators from the Emperor Realm, all of whom were obviously high-level members of Star Soul Palace. Xiao Yuyang greeted them and asked a few simple questions. After confirming that there had been no abnormalities while he was away, he relaxed. Yang Kai also walked over and greeted everyone. Shui Zhengmao looked at him with a dignified expression. Yang Kai, we can only rely on you. Although we can't be sure, the information sent back by the great emperors ultimately points to this place. We suspect that Princess Lan Xun is inside, so please help us. Yang Kai sternly said, Great Elder is too serious. I am also a cultivator in the Southern Territory and have a good personal relationship with Her Highness. If Her Highness is in trouble, I am naturally duty-bound to help. Shui Zhengmao was relieved to hear this and nodded repeatedly. Good, good, good. If you can really rescue Her Highness, this old master and others will be extremely grateful. If you have any requests in the future, my Star Soul Palace will not refuse. This was a heavy promise, so it was obvious that Shui Zhengmao and the others were also at their wits' end, otherwise, they would not have made such a promise so easily. Great Elder, please don't worry, I will take a look first, Yang Kai said before flying towards the bottom of the funnel. Lei Hong shouted from the side, Be careful, there seems to be something strange down there. Yang Kai nodded and soon approached the bottom of the funnel. Standing here and observing it, it was even more shocking than looking at it from above. The flowing sea of sand and the rotating funnel gave Yang Kai the illusion that the world was about to be swallowed up. Carefully releasing his divine sense, Yang Kai urged his space principles and silently probed the funnel for a long time. After coming up with a plan in his heart, he flew up. How is it? Shui Zhengmao asked anxiously. Yang Kai frowned and said, The entrance has been sealed. You have been waiting here for so long, haven't you found any trace of anyone? Shui Zhengmao shook his head and said, We haven't found anything. No one has been here for so long. Yang Kai said, There are traces of human activity here, indicating that all this was planned. Perhaps this is a conspiracy. If we really open the entrance, who knows what will happen? What will happen? Shui Zhengmao's expression became serious. Yang Kai shrugged and said, I don't know. Maybe it will alarm someone, or maybe it will make Her Highness' situation more difficult. If that's the case, are you sure you want to open this entrance? Everyone looked at each other and was silent for a long time before Shui Zhengmao quickly said, There is no news of the great emperors, and we don't know whether Her Highness is dead or alive. Now, this is the only clue. In that case, we can only open it. If she is alive, we must see her. If she is dead, we must see her corpse. The others nodded slightly, indicating that the Great Elder was right. Since there was a clue, they should explore it. No one would be willing to let it go just like that. What's more, what Yang Kai said was only a relatively bad situation. What if the situation was not so bad? Maybe they could find the Great Emperors and Lan Xun if they opened the entrance. Yang Kai nodded and said, Since you have decided, let's open it. However, this entrance seems to be a little unstable. If you want to go in, you must hurry. In addition, you must protect yourself as soon as you enter, so as not to give others a chance to take advantage of you. Shui Zhengmao smiled slightly. We have lived for so long and are all afraid of death. Naturally, we will not be careless in doing things. Yang Kai nodded and said, In that case, come with me. Saying so, he turned around and flew down again. The group of people hurriedly followed and scattered around Yang Kai, their expressions tense, waiting for him to open the entrance so that they could enter one after another. Under the fluctuations of the space principles, Yang Kai carefully unlocked the seal of the entrance and opened the entrance that should have been there. The void rippled, as if a stone had been thrown into a calm lake, and ripples spread out. Not long after, at the bottom of the funnel, a dark corridor suddenly appeared. A void corridor. Everyone's expression brightened when they saw this, especially Xiao Yuyang. He felt that his efforts in inviting young Kai over had not been in vain. They had tried to open the entrance before, but they had been unable to do so. If they had really used brute force, they might have destroyed this place. The problem that had stumped them was solved in the blink of an eye by young Kai. Sure enough, there were specialists in every field. Pairs of eyes kept darting between young Kai and the void corridor, waiting for him to give the order so that they could enter. However, the void corridor had just been formed and was very unstable, constantly distorting and changing. Young Kai could only urge his space principles to reinforce it so that it would be more convenient for everyone to travel. After a stick of incense worth of time, the void corridor that had been distorting and changing slowly stabilized. Young Kai shouted, "You can enter now. Everyone, be careful." Shui Zhengmao, who had been waiting for him to say this, immediately rushed in, his figure flickering as he disappeared into the void corridor one after another, with Xiao Yuyang bringing up the rear. After waiting for Xiao Yuyang to enter the void corridor, young Kai set off and prepared to follow. But at that moment, his face suddenly changed as he looked up. Up above, a stream of light shot down towards the void corridor, and within this stream of light, a vague figure appeared. Even someone as strong as young Kai could not see the face of this person. "Who is it?" Young Kai roared as he raised his palm and blasted upwards. Although this palm strike was hurried, he had been comprehending the dragon race's secret techniques recently, so he had unconsciously used it. A brilliant dragon pressure filled the air as the palm he stretched out seemed to transform into a dragon claw, capable of piercing a hole in the sky. However, the person who had just arrived did not dodge and continued to rush straight towards him. With a loud bang, young Kai's whole body shook violently as he fell straight down into the sand pit. His entire body had sunk into the sand pit, but he was unable to resist the rebound of his own strength. When he flew out of the sand pit again, his face covered in dust, there was no one in front of him. Turning his head to look at the void corridor that was about to disappear because he had lost control of himself, young Kai's expression became a little uncertain. In that instant of contact, he had not been able to sense the other party's strength, and he had not even been able to see what this person looked like. His palm strike was something that even a third-layer Emperor Realm Master would not be able to withstand, but this person had taken it head-on without being affected. In other words, this person's cultivation was definitely above the third-layer Emperor realm. False emperors, or great emperors. Only an existence with such a cultivation could withstand young Kai's blow and remain unaffected. However, there was one thing that young Kai was sure of, and that was that this person had no malicious intent towards him. Otherwise, he would not have just taken it head-on. Based on the other party's cultivation, if he had taken advantage of the situation to counterattack, young Kai would have been in big trouble. If this person was a false emperor, then who was it? If this person was a great emperor's, then who was it? Young Kai was confused, but this person had coincidentally rushed into the void corridor at this time, so he had obviously been monitoring this place, but Shui Zhengmao and the others had not been able to find him. Could it be the great emperors of the bright moon? But if it was really the great emperors of the bright moon, why did they not show up before? Who was it? Young Kai was extremely depressed. Seeing that the void corridor was about to close up again, young Kai did not have time to think about it. His figure flickered as he rushed into the corridor. His vision blurred for a moment before he appeared in another world. His Emperor Qi surged as he protected himself in case of any unforeseen circumstances, but there was no sneak attack. Young Kai turned his head to look around and could not help but frown. Because as far as the eye could see, there was no one around. Shui Zhengmao and the Emperor Realm of Star Soul Palace, who had entered before him, were nowhere to be seen. Even when he released his divine sense, he could not detect them. Where are they? Young Kai was at a loss. Chapter 3371. The dozen or so Star Soul Palace members from the Emperor Realm had clearly entered this place before him, but he didn't see a single one of them, which was a bit strange. However, if the entrance had a random teleportation function, it could explain the current situation. Young Kai had also entered a similar sealed world before. Although the entrance was the same, the people who entered would not appear in the same place. Judging from the current situation, This sealed world should be such an existence. That was why Yang Kai couldn't see anyone after everyone entered, and it was probably the same for everyone else. At this moment, they were probably in a situation where they were fighting alone. However, this also had its benefits. If everyone was spread out, there would be a higher chance of finding Lanzun, if she was really here. After confirming that there was no danger in his surroundings, Kai Yang began to examine his surroundings. This was a grey world, and the world energy here wasn't very rich. The entire world seemed somewhat dead and still. It was impossible for such a place to give birth to any kind of precious treasure. At first glance, the environment here was similar to some places in the Western Territory. The ground was full of sand, limestone, and some short plants. There was not the slightest sign of life in all directions. But for some reason, Yang Kai felt his heart palpitate as soon as he entered this place. He couldn't explain why, as if there was some great danger hidden here. Standing in place and pondering for a while, Yang Kai chose a direction at random and flew forward. This was indeed an independent small world. Although it had its own world principles, these principles were not complete. It was somewhat similar to the original small sealed world, and it was not small. Yang Kai flew forward for half a day, but he didn't see anything of note, nor did he find any trace of Xiao Yuyang and the others. It was as if they had evaporated into thin air. There was no distinction between day and night in this sealed world. It was always grey and the surrounding environment was very similar. Being alone in this kind of lonely environment, it was easy to feel tired. Another day later, Kai Yang, who was looking around, suddenly raised his eyebrows and looked in front of him. There was someone. More than a dozen kilometers ahead, there was a life aura. Yang Kai immediately focused his vision and looked in that direction. The person seemed to have noticed Yang Kai's gaze and after a flash, he flew in a certain direction. It was not easy to find a living person in this damned place, so how could Yang Kai miss this opportunity? He immediately chased after him. But soon, Yang Kai discovered that this person's speed was incredibly fast. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to close the distance between them. On top of that, this person's divine sense was extremely powerful, making it impossible for Yang Kai to see his true face or specific cultivation. Whenever his divine sense approached this person, it would be blocked by an invisible force. Yang Kai felt like he was being toyed with for no reason. Although he was annoyed, he also realized that the other party seemed to want to lead him somewhere. After making some guesses, Kai Yang deliberately slowed down a bit. Sure enough, the guy in front of him also slowed down. He sped up a bit, but the other side also sped up. Hateful. Yang Kai was furious and no longer hesitated, chasing after him with all his strength. Although he knew that there was likely to be some kind of trap waiting for him ahead, this was still a clue after all, so even though he knew that there was a tiger in the mountain, he had no choice but to follow it. One chased, one fled. After about an hour, Kai Yang's expression suddenly twitched. Because in that instant, he actually lost track of the other person's aura. That person seemed to have disappeared from this world for no reason, and there was no trace of him at all. On the contrary, not far ahead, there were several life auras that obviously belonged to other people. Among them, 3 were familiar to Yang Kai. Thinking of this, Yang Kai raised his brow and hurriedly rushed in that direction. Not long after, he arrived at a high rocky slope. On the high slope, there were 5 figures sitting cross-legged, 4 women and 1 man. When Yang Kai's gaze swept over them, he couldn't help but look happy and quickly shouted, "Yun-er." Among the 5 figures, one of them was actually Lin Yun-er. Although on the way here, he learned that Lin Yun-er had also disappeared, and Yang Kai also guessed that it might be the same group, he didn't expect to find her here. Looking at the others, he found that sure enough, Yarrow Lin, who was captured on the Eastern Sea, and Lan Zun, who had disappeared in the Southern Territory, were all here. Yang Kai didn't know the remaining man and woman, but with the previous information, he could guess that this man and woman were either related to the great emperors by blood or were direct disciples. One of the men had a fair complexion and looked handsome. He seemed to be around 30 years old. The other woman was covered with a layer of gauze, making it impossible to see her true appearance. However, judging from her exquisite and enchanting figure, This woman's appearance was definitely not ordinary. Yang Kai didn't rush over rashly. He had been led here by someone, otherwise, he wouldn't have found the missing children and disciples of the great emperors so quickly. Why did that person lead him here, and what kind of conspiracy was he up to? In this unfamiliar environment, how could Yang Kai not be on guard? Yun-er. Yang Kai called out again, but Lin Yun-er, who was sitting cross-legged opposite him, didn't respond at all, as if she had fallen into a deep sleep. Yang Kai's divine sense wandered back and forth, but he couldn't find the aura of the person who had led him here, nor did he find any traces of traps around Lin Yun-er and the others. The 5 of them seemed to have been subjected to a divine technique, falling into a deep sleep without any perception of the outside world. Of these 5 people, except for Yarrow Lin, who was from the 3rd Order Dao Source Realm, the remaining 4 were all Emperor Realm Masters, especially the Veiled Woman, whose cultivation was the highest, equal to Yang Kai's, at the level of a 2nd Order Emperor Realm Master. This woman should be a disciple of the great emperors, right? Sure enough, a famous teacher produces a brilliant disciple. Although he couldn't see her face clearly, Yang Kai was sure that she wasn't too old. Obviously, her aptitude was extremely good to have such a cultivation. However, thinking that the person who had captured Yarrow Lin was a fake emperor, Yang Kai was relieved. Although the strength of these 5 people was good, they were still far inferior to a fake emperor. If they were targeted by a fake emperor, none of them would be spared. After pondering for a while, Yang Kai strode towards Lin Yun-er and the others. Since he had found Lin Yun-er, Lan Xun, and the others, Yang Kai couldn't just sit back and watch. No matter what, he had to wake them up and ask them about the situation first. At the very least, he had to know who had attacked them, captured them here, and what their ultimate purpose was. Not long after, Yang Kai arrived in front of them. To his surprise, everything was as usual, without the slightest abnormality. He went straight to Lin Yun-er, stretched out a finger, and tapped her forehead, slightly urging his Emperor Qi and divine sense to check the situation in her body. There were no injuries, no abnormalities, and her life signs were very stable, but at this moment, Lin Yun-er seemed to have fallen into a strange state. Her knowledge sea was wide open and unguarded, as if she had fallen into an illusion, completely unaware of everything in the outside world. In other words, if someone wanted to harm her at this time, they could easily succeed. Perceiving this, Yang Kai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He had been worried that Lin Yun-er and the others had been implanted with some kind of strange barrier, but if that was all, then he had a way to wake them up. Silently urging his golden divine dragon source, Yang Kai sent his divine sense into Lin Yun-er's knowledge sea, transforming into a giant dragon head that roared, "Yun-er, wake up." Dragon roar. The most basic of the dragon race's many secret techniques and had the effect of clearing one's mind. The dragon's roar reverberated in Lin Yun-er's knowledge sea, creating layer after layer of ripples. When these ripples spread out, Lin Yun-er's knowledge sea was flooded with monstrous waves, and then her knowledge sea became clear. Faintly, there seemed to be the sound of something shattering. Lin Yun-er let out an unconscious whimper as her brow furrowed, and then she slowly opened her eyes. As her vision focused, Yang Kai's face appeared in front of her. Lin Yun-er blinked her big eyes, a blank look on her face. "Yun-er, how do you feel?" Yang Kai asked nervously. Although he had used the dragon race's secret technique to wake her up, using it in her knowledge sea could have injured Lin Yun-er's knowledge sea with the slightest carelessness. Uncle Yang?" Lin Yun-er was obviously still a little out of it as she stared at Yang Kai in a daze. "Why are you here?" Yang Kai smiled slightly. "I came to find you, so don't worry about me for now." "What about you? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Hearing this, Lin Yun-er checked her condition and then laughed heartlessly. "I don't feel uncomfortable." Suddenly, her brow furrowed. "It's just that." Yang Kai's expression changed as he suddenly became nervous. "Just what?" "A little hungry." Lin Yun-er reached out and rubbed her belly before sticking out her tongue at Yang Kai. The corners of Yang Kai's mouth twitched. Only then did he remember that this girl had somehow been raised to be a foodie by the Iron Blood Great Emperor's side. The last time he met her, she was like this. This time, she had just escaped danger and was already crying out that she was hungry. How careless. "If you're hungry, find something to eat first, I'll wake them up," Yang Kai said and walked over to Lan Xun. What happened to them? Lin Yun seemed to have only just realized that there were other people around her, and her eyes widened in surprise. Don't you remember? Yang Kai turned to look at her. Lin Yun suddenly showed a thoughtful look, and after a while, she clapped her hands and said, "Oh, I remember, I was caught by someone. That old man was so strong, I couldn't beat him." Old man? Yang Kai raised his brow. Was it an old man in a black robe? Lin Yun shook her head and said, "He wasn't wearing a black robe, he had white hair, I don't know." White hair? Yang Kai was a little stunned. He remembered that the guy who caught Yarrow Lin last time did not have white hair. So, the person who caught Yarrow Lin and Lin Yun were not the same person? Chapter 3372. But if Yuna sees him next time, I'll have to thank him properly. Lin Yuna smiled sweetly again. Thank him for what? Yang Kai asked with a straight face. No matter who did it, it was obvious that they wanted to harm her, so why should she thank him? Lin Yuna said matter-of-factly, if he hadn't brought Yuna here, Yuna wouldn't have been able to see Uncle Yang. Of course, I have to thank him properly. Yang Kai was speechless and smiled bitterly. Do as you wish. Uncle Yang, were you also brought here by him? Lin Yuna asked again. Yang Kai shook his head. I came here to find you. As he spoke, he stretched out a finger and touched Lan Xun's forehead. Lin Yuna chattered from the side. Uncle Yang, it wasn't that I didn't want to go to the Northern Territory with you last time, it was Master who brought me back and destroyed the thing you worked so hard to arrange. You're not angry, are you? Sure enough, it was the Iron Blood Great Emperor who did it. Yang Kai had already guessed this, and now that Lin Yuna confirmed it, he knew that his guess was right. It was really the Iron Blood Great Emperor who destroyed his space array. Immediately, he shook his head and said, "No, your master did it for your own good." Lin Yuna suddenly laughed. When you see Master next time, I'll ask him to apologize to you. Yang Kai sweated profusely. I wouldn't dare. He then solemnly said, you can tell this to me, but you can't tell your master. If he did, he would be skinned alive by the Iron Blood Great Emperor. En. Lin Yun nodded obediently. At this moment, Lan Xun also woke up, but she was obviously not as careless as Lin Yun. As soon as she woke up, she urged her Emperor Qi to protect her body and rushed out, staring at Yang Kai with a vigilant expression. After reacting, she asked in surprise, Brother Yang? Junior sister Lan. Yang Kai smiled slightly. Lan Xun stretched out her hand and rubbed her forehead, dispelling the hostility, and smiled awkwardly. Excuse me. It's fine. Yang Kai slowly shook her head. Her reaction was a normal reaction, but Lin Yun was a little confused. Where is this? Lan Xun turned her head and looked around, asking blankly. Yang Kai said, I'm not sure. I just came from a sea of sand in the Western Territory. It seems to be an independent secret realm. You should recover first. I'll wake the others up. Lan Xun glanced at the three people who were still in a deep sleep, nodded slightly, walked back, sat down cross-legged, and waited quietly. She had many things to ask, but now was obviously not the time. The third one that Yang Kai woke up was Yarrow Lin. This woman had the lowest cultivation, so Yang Kai was the most careful when dealing with her. However, what made Yang Kai speechless was that as soon as she woke up, she screamed in fear, Don't kill me, don't kill me. My father is the great emperor of the serene soul. He can give you a lot of good things. Don't kill me. Yang Kai looked at her fiercely. Do I look like I want to kill you? Yarrow Lin looked at Yang Kai's face seriously and quickly recovered. She pointed at him and said, It's you. Yang Kai snorted. So what if it's me? What do you think? You dared to leave me in the lurch. I'll definitely report this to my father and have him punish you severely. Yarrow Lin ground her teeth as she glared at Yang Kai. She clearly still remembered the scene of her being captured 2 years ago. Yang Kai looked at her coldly. Are you sure you want to do this? Yarrow Lin opened her mouth, obviously wanting to shout something, but when she met Yang Kai's cold eyes, her heart couldn't help but jump. She swallowed the words on the tip of her tongue and muttered, Why are you so fierce? My father is the great emperor of the serene soul. Yang Kai reached out and pointed at Lan Xun. Guess who her father is? How could Yarrow Lin not know Lan Xun? After all, the five of them had been together for a while and knew each other very well. The identity of the daughter of the great emperors may be very deterrent to others, but it was meaningless to the others present. Yarrow Lin shrunk her neck in fear at his fierce look. Only then did she remember that this guy in front of her wanted to kill her back then, and she almost died at his hands. For a moment, she couldn't help but feel a little scared. Well, Brother Yang, Sister Yarrow Lin is just a little ignorant of the world. Don't be angry with her, Lan Xun tried to smooth things over. Yang Kai snorted coldly, I think she's spoiled. After meeting Yarrow Lin's mother, how could Yang Kai not understand how Yarrow Lin's arrogant personality had been nurtured? Like mother, like daughter. Yarrow Lin stopped talking and just hid behind Lan Xun. Yang Kai didn't bother to pay attention to her and walked straight to the man in his 30s and used the dragon roar secret technique again. After a while, the man's figure moved and he obviously woke up, but what surprised Yang Kai was that he kept his eyes closed. Although his eyes were closed, Yang Kai felt like he was being scrutinized, which made Yang Kai a little uncomfortable. This guy was too arrogant. So what if he was a disciple of the great emperors? This old man had saved his life, but he couldn't even open his eyes to look at his savior. How should I address you? The man suddenly spoke, his voice as gentle as jade, very pleasant to the ears. Yang Kai said indifferently, Yang Kai. A look of surprise appeared on the man's face, so it's Brother Yang. Yang Kai was surprised, you know me? The man smiled slightly, I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time. Seeing you today, you really deserve your reputation. Yang Kai said lightly, you're flattering me. Seeming to feel his indifference, the man pondered for a moment before understanding the whole story and smiling slightly. Brother Yang, please forgive me. This one didn't mean to be rude, it's just that it's inconvenient for me to show my true face. Saying so, he suddenly opened his eyes and their eyes met. Yang Kai was surprised because this guy was blind. His eyes were pure white, without the slightest trace of black. If anyone saw this appearance at first glance, they would definitely be a little scared. Yang Kai understood why he kept his eyes closed. Yang Kai couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed, scratching his face and saying, sorry, I didn't know about this. He thought this man was putting on airs, so he closed his eyes, but he didn't expect it to be because he was disabled. However, this man's cultivation was the emperor realm, and his honored master was one of the great emperors, yet he still couldn't see the light of day. It could be seen that his eyes were innate, so no matter how hard he tried, it would be difficult for him to recover. How should I address you? Yang Kai asked. Jiao Zhan. Lan Xun explained with a smile, Brother Jiao is the only disciple of the Master of Heaven's revelations. It is said that he has grasped 80% of the Master's teachings. Yang Kai was shocked, Brother Jiao is amazing. Among the 10 great emperors, the great emperor of Heaven's revelations may not have been the strongest, but he was the most knowledgeable. It was rumored that the Heaven's revelations great emperors could see through the Heaven's secrets, see the past, and see the future. Jiao Zhan was the only disciple of the great emperors of Heaven's revelations, so obviously his talent was outstanding and he was suitable to inherit the mantle of the Heaven's revelations great emperors. Lan Xun saying that he had grasped 80% of the great emperor's teachings wasn't just a compliment, but a genuine ability. Jiao Zhan smiled modestly, Junior Sister Lan is too kind. Honored Master's strength is far above mine, and this Jiao Zhan will never be able to reach Honored Master's height in this lifetime. Suddenly changing the topic, he stared at Yang Kai with his pale eyes and said, Brother Yang, be careful. Yang Kai frowned, be careful of what? Jiao Zhan had already closed his mouth and was sitting there quietly, as if he had fallen asleep. Yang Kai looked at him blankly and turned to look at Lan Xun. Lan Xun's mouth moved a few times, indicating that she didn't understand either. As far as she knew, the great emperors of Heaven's revelations also seemed to be like this. They would often say some inexplicable words, but they could be completely verified afterwards. Several great emperors had received warnings from the great emperors of Heaven's revelations when they were young, so they were able to avoid disaster. Jiao Zhan was the disciple of the great emperors of Heaven's revelations, so now that he suddenly said such words to Yang Kai, It was no doubt that Yang Kai might also be in danger. After thinking about it, he told Yang Kai about his concerns. Yang Kai grinned and replied, "Different situations call for different measures. After all, it was just a warning, so no one knew what the situation was. Yang Kai couldn't always be cautious in the future, so he could only wait for things to happen and then think of a solution." After this matter was over, Yang Kai turned to look at the last woman and said, "This should be the disciple of Master Hua Ying, right?" Lan Zun was surprised. "Brother Yang, how do you know? Have you seen senior sister Li before?" Yang Kai shook his head and said, "I haven't seen her before, but I received some news on the way here. I know that several of you have disappeared together. Now that everyone else is a match, it's not difficult to guess who the last one is. So that's how it is." Lan Zun nodded and suddenly smiled mischievously. "Senior sister Li is a great beauty. Brother Yang, do you want to see her true face? While senior sister Li is asleep, Brother Yang can feast his eyes on her. If you miss this chance, I'm afraid you won't have another chance in the future." Yang Kai laughed. "Junior sister is also a great beauty. If you want to see her, do you need to be so sneaky?" Lan Zun pursed her lips and said, "Brother Yang, don't say that." Although Zun is not bad, she can't compare to senior sister Li. Hearing her say this, Yang Kai was a little interested. Lan Zun was already a heavenly fragrance national beauty, but she said that this senior sister Li was even better. This naturally piqued his curiosity. However, he was just curious. He wouldn't really lift this woman's veil to take a look. If he really did that, wouldn't he be acting like a hooligan? There were still a few people watching from the side. Slowly shaking his head, Yang Kai stretched out his hand and pointed forward. Circulating his divine sense and emperor qi, Yang Kai's expression became solemn. After a short while, the woman in front of him trembled slightly, her long eyelashes trembling a few times, and then her pair of beautiful eyes suddenly opened. When their four eyes met, Yang Kai suddenly felt a very strange feeling. Those bright, star-like eyes seemed to have become the only thing in this world, attracting his attention and making him constantly sink into them, giving him a feeling that he would not hesitate even if it meant he would never be able to recover from it. Alarm bells rang in Kai Yang's heart. Just as he was feeling that something was wrong, the pair of eyes in front of him returned to their normal state. The invisible force that was pulling at his mind suddenly disappeared, allowing him to escape from that strange state. While he was secretly rejoicing, he also felt a sense of loss, as if he had missed something. Chapter 3373. Shiqing thanks brother for saving me. How should I address you, brother? The woman opposite him suddenly spoke, her voice crisp and clear, like the tinkling of a mountain spring, extremely pleasant to the ear. Yang Kai. So it's brother Yang. Li Shiqing nodded and expressed her gratitude again before getting up and looking around. Where is this place? Lan Zun explained to her, and Li Shiqing gently nodded. Yang Kai frowned and stared at the side of her face, faintly feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Thinking about what happened just now, it seemed to be quite normal. The other party didn't show any signs of using a bewitching technique. The reason why he lost his composure for a moment should be due to her natural charm. Slowly shaking his head, Yang Kai didn't think about it anymore and clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention, saying, "This is a dangerous place, we shouldn't stay for long. Let's leave as soon as possible." He had been led here by someone before, and before he came in, there was a suspected false emperor or great emperors who had broken into this place. This damned place gave Yang Kai an inexplicable sense of palpitations, so of course he wanted to leave as soon as possible. Now that the missing children and disciples of the great emperors had been found, as long as they looked for the exit of this sealed world, they could leave this place. Lan Zun nodded and said, "Brother Yang is right, but we know nothing about this place, so we'll have to trouble brother to lead the way." Yang Kai smiled bitterly, "I don't have a clue, let's take it one step at a time. It's best if we can find the elders of Star Soul Palace and then discuss with them. Maybe they'll find something." Naturally, no one had any objection to this, and after the discussion, Yang Kai led the way and rushed forward in a certain direction. Apart from Yang Kai, whose background was unknown, the remaining 5 were all existences with huge backgrounds. Such a luxurious lineup could be said to be rare even in 1,000 years. After all, these people were usually scattered throughout the various territory of the star boundary. If it weren't for the mastermind behind the scenes who caught them this time, it would be impossible for them to gather together. However, although everyone's backgrounds were not poor, they were actually quite easy to get along with. Except for Yarrow Lin's overly arrogant and domineering personality, whether it was Lan Xun or Lin Yun, none of them had ever done anything to bully others. As for Jiao Zhon, although his eyes were crippled, he was still gentle and refined. Li Shiqing's temperament was a bit colder, but fortunately, from the moment she opened her eyes and called Yang Kai senior brother, it could be seen that she would not look down on anyone because of her background. They didn't know how big this secret territory was, and the whole world was grey. After a day and a night, the group of 6 did not encounter any living creatures. What they saw seemed to be some repetitive scenes, making them involuntarily wonder if they had been going in circles in a certain place. However, under Yang Kai's perception, there was no trace of an illusion array, which made him very puzzled. "Uncle Yang, Yun is hungry," Lin Yun suddenly cried out. When she was awakened by Yang Kai, she was already saying that she was hungry. At this time, her stomach was already growling. Yang Kai was actually very curious. What kind of cultivation method did the Iron Blood Great Emperor teach her that she had to eat to replenish her energy in the Emperor realm? Under normal circumstances, the people in the Emperor realm had already gotten rid of the desire for food and could survive by simply absorbing world energy. But Lin Yun was obviously not like this. Although this girl's strength was amazing, whether she ate or not seemed to have some impact on her. At this moment, her spirit seemed to be a little sluggish. Yang Kai thought for a moment and said, "Then you eat something first. Let's also take the opportunity to rest." After the group woke up, they began to follow Yang Kai. It was obvious that they were also a little tired, so they could take advantage of this time to adjust. No one had any objections and immediately began to adjust their breathing. Lin Yun, on the other hand, directly took out her own large black wok and set up a small stove on the ground. Then, she poured some clear water into the wok and threw a strangely shaped demonic beast into it. She covered the wok with the lid, lit the fire, and began to cook happily. Yang Kai watched with the corner of his mouth twitching. He had seen how powerful this unassuming big black wok was with his own eyes. It seemed to be an emperor artifact given to Lin Yun by the Iron Blood Great Emperor, called Return to One. Its power was unfathomable. But in the hands of this girl, it was very good and was used to cook meat. Yang Kai wondered what the Iron Blood Great Emperor would think if he knew. But then again, the food cooked with this Return to One was indeed delicious. Yang Kai had tasted it last time and could not wait to swallow his tongue. Not only was it delicious, but it could also condense all the essence of the cooked food. After Lin Yun cooked like this, it was not long before a burst of meat fragrance wafted around, causing the few who were meditating to twitch their nostrils and open their eyes to look. Lin Yun no longer looked sluggish and instead stared at her black wok with sparkling eyes, smacking her lips constantly. Yang Kai could not bear to look straight at her and could not help reminding her, "Yun, your saliva." With a slurping sound, Lin Yun took a deep breath and then showed Yang Kai an embarrassed smile, but soon she said heroically, "There's also a share for you. It's almost done, don't worry." Lan Xun could not help smiling, "We're not in a hurry, aren't you?" Yarrow Lin curled her lips and said, "I don't want to eat these things." Having said that, her eyes could not help but look into the pot. Although she was the daughter of the Serene Soul Great Emperors and had been doted on since she was a child, she had never smelled such a fragrant smell. With such an interruption, the originally tense and dazed atmosphere relaxed a lot. After a while, there was a puffing sound from the pot and Lin Yun excitedly said, Okay, we can start now." While speaking, she opened the lid of the pot and suddenly a pot of yellow, amber-colored broth appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Lin Yun reached out and tore off the thigh of a monster beast from the pot and handed it to Yang Kai. "Uncle Yang, this is for you." Yang Kai smiled and took it, "Then I won't be polite." With the previous experience, he also knew that the things cooked by Gui Yi were not only used to satisfy the appetite of the stomach, all the essence of the monster beast's body was cooked out. Long-term consumption would definitely have the effect of improving one's cultivation. Lin Yun'er's cultivation progress was so fast, it was estimated that it had something to do with her eating these things. In her space ring, there must be some monster beast corpses stored at all times. For example, the one being cooked now was at least a ninth-order existence. Lin Yun'er divided the meat one by one, leaving no one behind. Lan Xun held a large piece of meat and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She hadn't eaten these things for many years, but since Lin Yun'er was so enthusiastic, she couldn't refuse. Looking at Yang Kai eating with relish, she couldn't help but take a bite, her eyes suddenly lighting up. She felt that the meat in her hand was more delicious than any kind of pills. She had never eaten something so delicious before. How could she bear it? She tried her best to maintain her image and chewed slowly. Yarrow Lin had long forgotten what she had just said. At this time, she was wolfing down the food, even gnawing the bones clean. Jiao Zhan didn't say a word, but he ate no less than the others. At this time, any kind of divine strategy was nonsense, and the first would get the first prize. With meat in her mouth, Lin Yun'er said vaguely, "There's also soup." Master said that soup is the best thing. As he ate, Yang Kai suddenly frowned. "Where's Li Shiqing?" Everyone's movements stopped at the same time. They looked at each other and suddenly realized a problem. Originally, there were 6 people, but now there were only 5 left. Li Shiqing had disappeared without them noticing. Although everyone's attention was attracted by what Lin Yun'er was cooking, there were several people from the Emperor realm present. Even if they didn't deliberately keep an eye on Li Shiqing, if she left, there was no reason for them not to notice. But it was not until Yang Kai reminded them that the others realized this problem. She seemed to have evaporated without a trace. For a moment, they couldn't help feeling a little creeped out. Lin Yun'er swallowed the meat in her mouth and said, "She was here just now, but when I was dividing the meat, I didn't seem to see her." Yang Kai frowned and looked at the others. No one noticed. He also knew that he probably wouldn't get anything out of asking. Among the people present, his cultivation was the highest, but even he didn't notice anything, so it was impossible for the others to notice. Lan Xun shook her head solemnly, losing her appetite all of a sudden. Yarrow Lin asked nervously, was she caught by someone again? Probably because she remembered the scene of her being captured, she couldn't help shivering and leaning closer to Lan Xun, trying to find a sense of security. "Who can take her away quietly under our noses?" Yang Kai shook his head slowly. Even the great emperors couldn't do such a thing. Jiao Zhan didn't say a word, but suddenly turned his hand and took out 3 pieces of turtle shells, 1 big and 2 small. The big one was the size of an adult's palm and the small one was the size of a baby's fist, but each turtle shell exuded an extremely ancient and desolate aura. Obviously, they had a long history. Yang Kai stretched out his hand and formed a seal, then threw the 3 turtle shells forward. When the turtle shells landed, Yang Kai reached out and touched the patterns on the 3 turtle shells, closed his eyes and pondered for a while, then pointed in a direction. "Senior sister Li should be in that direction." "You can calculate that." Yang Kai was surprised, but this hint was enough. Although he and Li Shiqing didn't know each other, since he had met her, he naturally had to rescue her together. Moreover, he didn't know why Li Shiqing suddenly disappeared, which made him a little upset and anxious to find her. "I'll go over there and take a look. You wait for me here," Yang Kai said and stood up. Lan Xun said, "Let's go together." Yang Kai shook his head and said, "I don't know whether that place is good or bad. I can deal with it alone, but if we go together, it won't be good if it turns out to be a trap." Hearing what he said, Lan Xun also nodded slightly. Yang Kai was proficient in the space principles. Unless the space around him was imprisoned, it would be really difficult for ordinary people to keep him here. Chapter 3374. He told the 4 of them to stay in place and wait for him. If he did not return after a long time, they were to find a way to find the people from Star Soul Palace and leave this place. After giving this order, Yang Kai flew in the direction Jiao Zhan had pointed. Searching all the way, he did not see any trace of Li Shiqing, but there seemed to be some remnants of her scent in the air. Jiao Zhan's direction was correct. He was really able to calculate where Li Shiqing had gone, which made Yang Kai admire him greatly. This so-called divine foresight was really a real thing. However, there was one thing that made him feel strange. He only smelled the scent of Li Shiqing's body and did not sense the aura of others. If this was the case, then Li Shiqing had left alone. But why would she leave alone? Why couldn't she inform everyone in advance? After a cup of tea's time, a lake suddenly appeared in front of him. Before he even got close, Yang Kai heard the sound of splashing water coming from that side. Feeling suspicious, he quietly concealed his aura and approached the lake. Not long after, he arrived at the lakeside and hid behind a tree, quietly looking in that direction. With just a glance, Yang Kai felt embarrassed. Because in the lake, a graceful and delicate figure was bathing. Although it was just a quick glance, Yang Kai's eyesight was amazing, and the lake water was extremely clear, so he could see everything that he should and should not see. This figure was so enchanting, it really made one's blood boil. Even though Yang Kai was a seasoned warrior, at this moment, he could not help but feel his heart skip a beat, and his heartbeat suddenly accelerated. The person bathing in the lake was none other than Li Shiqing, who had quietly disappeared. Yang Kai did not expect that he would see such an alluring scene on his way here, so he was both angry and amused. Now it seemed that Li Shiqing did not encounter any danger, nor was she taken away. She should have left on her own. But there was one thing that Yang Kai could not figure out. How did she leave without anyone noticing? Just as he was thinking this, Li Shiqing suddenly shouted, "Who is it?" Perhaps it was because Kai Yang's heartbeat had sped up a moment ago, causing her to notice some clues. She immediately turned her head and looked towards Kai Yang's hiding place. While she was shouting, she kicked up the sand at the bottom of the lake, covering the place where she was hiding and covering the seductive spring scenery. Yang Kai hesitated for a moment but could only brace himself and say, "It's me, Yang Kai." He did not mean to see her bathing, but now that she found out, it would be difficult to explain himself, so he might as well admit it. "Brother Yang." Li Shiqing's voice was a little surprised. "Why are you here?" Hearing her ask, Yang Kai's a little angry. "Yang Kai, I want to ask you, why are you here? Do you know what kind of place this damned place? Running here without saying a word, are you looking for death? Is there something wrong with your brain?" After saying this, he couldn't help but frown. He had nothing to do with this woman, so whether she lived or died had nothing to do with him. If she really wanted to die, no one could stop her, but he just couldn't help but curse her. After a moment of silence, Li Shiqing's voice came, "Sorry, I just want to clean up. I haven't bathed in a long time, so I feel uncomfortable. Just now I saw that you were busy, so I thought I still had some time. Just as I was passing by, I saw a small lake here, so I came over." This reaction surprised Yang Kai. He scratched his face and said, "If that's the case, you should tell us in advance. They are very worried about you. It won't happen again." Li Shiqing replied, "There will be a next time." Kai Yang couldn't help but roll his eyes and made a decision in his heart. After leaving this place, he would immediately part ways with this woman. In the future, he would never see her again. Faintly, he had a feeling that if he stayed with her, nothing good would happen. "Brother Yang." Li Shiqing shouted again, seeming to be a little embarrassed, "Are you still there?" "Yes." Yang Kai responded in a deep voice. "Can you please leave for a moment? I want to get dressed." These words could easily make one's imagination run wild. Yang Kai's mind involuntarily replayed the scene just now. He quickly shook his head and threw away the distracting thoughts in his heart, saying, "Okay, I'll wait for you over there. Many thanks." Li Shiqing thanked him gently. Yang Kai's figure leapt up and flew away. But just as he was about to move, he suddenly heard Li Shiqing's cry of alarm from behind. He hurriedly stopped and turned his head to look, only to see that in the center of the lake, where Li Shiqing originally stood, a huge bubble appeared. A pure white arm struggled for a moment, then quickly sank to the bottom of the lake. "What's going on?" Yang Kai was dumbfounded. At this moment, without thinking about anything else, his figure flashed and flew in that direction, at the same time shouting, "Li Shiqing." How could there be any response? The bottom of the lake was in chaos, and Yang Kai could not see any trace of Li Shiqing. When he swept out with his divine sense, he could detect her presence, but he did not know what kind of danger she was in. She was continuously sinking to the bottom of the lake and struggling. With no time to think about it, Yang Kai turned around and dove straight into the lake. With a splash of water, Yang Kai pushed his emperor chi, pushed away the surrounding water, and reached down to grab something. What touched his hand was tender and smooth, as if he had grabbed the most exquisite silk in the world. Yang Kai pulled again, and a naked, curvaceous, snow-white body was pulled in front of him. Her skin was so delicate that it seemed as if it would break if he blew on it, and it was enough to make any man in the world go crazy. But Yang Kai did not have the time to appreciate this, so he just looked down with a dignified expression and asked in a deep voice, "What's wrong?" Li Shiqing did not answer, but instead followed his strength and crashed into Yang Kai's arms. In an instant, Yang Kai felt an amazing bouncing force on his chest. Looking over, there was a face that could turn all living things upside down in front of him. The veil that had been covering her face had disappeared, revealing Li Shiqing's true appearance. As Lan Zun had said, she was indeed a great beauty, and her beauty was outrageous. The Creator seemed to want to gather all the beauty in her body, and this kind of beauty was enough to make one's soul tremble. Their eyes met, and Yang Kai felt a sense of danger, and at the same time, Li Shiqing's soft whisper reached his ears, "Look at me." That voice seemed to have a magical power that made Yang Kai involuntarily look into her eyes. A strange light flashed in those beautiful gem-like eyes, like a star field at night, shining brightly with stars. Yang Kai seemed to have been cast a spell and stood there motionless. The invisible divine sense easily broke through the defenses of Yang Kai's knowledge sea and planted a brand in his mind. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. After an unknown amount of time, Yang Kai's eyes suddenly moved, and his vision refocused. Looking forward, he saw Li Shiqing in front of him showing a gentle smile, a smile that was enough to make all things in the world lose their color in an instant. That smile would only ever bloom for him. Yang Kai flew into a rage, grabbed Li Shiqing's slender neck, jumped out of the water, and floated to the shore, pressed her against the trunk of a big tree, stared at her coldly, and said, "What did you just do to me?" At this time, how could Yang Kai not understand that Li Shiqing's encounter was just a self-directed play? There was no danger under the lake at all. He was a little confused. The lake water was so clear that it was impossible to hide any monsters, and Li Shiqing was a second-order Emperor Realm Master and a disciple of the Flower Shadow Great Emperors. How could she be in danger so easily? Only now did he understand that everything was just a trick to lure him closer. It was laughable that he had really fallen for it. But who would have thought that Li Shiqing, a stranger he met by chance, would use such a method to scheme against him? Suddenly, he remembered Gao Zhon's warning. Could it be that it was Li Shiqing? But why? Why did she scheme against him? What did she do to him just now? Yang Kai didn't feel any discomfort, and there was no trace of injury on his body. His knowledge sea was also normal. But what was that feeling just now? He clearly felt that Li Shiqing had done something to his knowledge sea. If that was really the case, why didn't the seven-colored soul-warming lotus have any abnormalities? Yang Kai even suspected that Li Shiqing had come out alone to lure him over. At the edge of the small lake, a naked, enchanting beauty was being held by the neck by Kai Yang and pressed against a tree trunk. Kai Yang's face was filled with anger and murderous intent. No matter how one looked at it, this situation was extremely strange. Yang Kai flew into a rage out of humiliation after accidentally falling into her trap. Naturally, he didn't hold back. Although Li Shiqing's cultivation wasn't bad, with her neck pinned like this, she had difficulty breathing and her face was flushed red. But she didn't complain at all. She had a smile on her face that was enough to melt one's heart. She looked at Yang Kai quietly, as if she would have no complaints even if Yang Kai killed her. Yang Kai's heart clenched and he couldn't help but loosen his grip a little. He shouted in a low voice, "Speak. From now on, let's never be separated again," Li Shiqing suddenly said. As soon as these words came out, Yang Kai felt sweetness in his heart, but he still frowned. "Are you crazy? If you keep talking nonsense, I'll really do it. Don't think I don't dare kill you." Li Shiqing looked at him with a smile, not knowing what fear was. She reached out her jade hands and grabbed Yang Kai's big hands, softly saying, "Are you willing?" Yang Kai sneered, "Why wouldn't I? Damn. He really couldn't bear to. As soon as the idea of killing her appeared, he immediately rejected it. In front of him, this woman he had only known for a few days, yet she seemed to have become one of the most important existences in his life. It was as if they had known each other for a long time and had already left their brand in each other's lives. Chapter 3375. Bewitching Technique. Yang Kai's brow furrowed as he thought of a possibility. Only a bewitching technique could explain the current situation and explain his current mood. Otherwise, if a woman he had just met by chance had plotted against him, obviously harboring ill intentions, how could he be so worried about personal gains and losses? Li Shiqing just smiled and did not say anything. Yang Kai stared at her fiercely, as if he wanted to eat her alive. His murderous intent was so thick that it was almost tangible. If it were anyone else facing this situation, they would be terrified, but Li Shiqing did not feel fear at all. Even if Yang Kai was holding her by the neck and pressing her against the tree trunk, her smile never faded, but her slightly furrowed brow showed her pain. "I'll ask you one last time, what did you do to me?" Yang Kai's voice was cold and piercing, like a cold wind blowing from a snowy mountain. As if she could feel his impatience, Li Shiqing hesitated for a moment before finally pursing her lips and saying, "Heart seal." "What is a heart seal?" Yang Kai frowned. "Heart to heart, wings to wings." Li Shiqing smiled. Yang Kai's brow furrowed even deeper. "You mean to say that after you used this heart seal secret technique on me, I developed feelings for you? Is it because you can't understand it yourself?" Li Shiqing looked at him mischievously before saying, "And this feeling goes both ways. Whatever you feel right now, I also feel the same." Yang Kai glared at her. What kind of bullshit secret technique was this? It could actually force two people who had met by chance to be together, causing both of them to suffer. If it was one-sided, then it would be fine, but Li Shiqing was also restricted by this secret technique. No wonder this woman had been looking at him strangely from the beginning, so it was because of this. "Are you very happy?" Li Shiqing suddenly asked. Yang Kai said with a straight face, "Do you think I'm happy in the slightest?" The corners of your mouth just curled up. Li Shiqing stared at him with wide eyes. "Bullshit." Yang Kai immediately denied. Li Shiqing angrily said, "Can you not be so fierce? You're making me uncomfortable. Who are you flirting with?" Yang Kai looked at her from the corner of his eyes. When he first woke her up, Yang Kai thought that this woman was really cold and arrogant. Now that he had a closer look at her, he realized that he had been blind. She was no longer cold and arrogant. Perhaps these words were a bit heavy. Li Shiqing hatefully glared at him, her beautiful eyes full of hidden bitterness. Kai Yang's hand that was choking her neck struggled a few times, but in the end, he couldn't get past this hurdle. He hated himself to no end. He clearly had the heart to kill her, but no matter what, he couldn't bear to do it. He let go of her hand and said, "Put on your clothes and talk." It wasn't a good idea to be naked all the time. Even if he didn't look at it intentionally, that white body would still affect his mind. Li Shiqing touched her neck and coughed a few times before taking out her clothes from her space ring and pushing them in front of Yang Kai. "What are you doing?" Yang Kai said impatiently. "Help me put it on." Li Shiqing looked at him with a smile. "Get lost." Yang Kai sneered. He was currently filled with anger, yet this woman actually wanted him to help her put on her clothes. "Dream on. Are you going to put it on or not?" Li Shiqing stared at him stubbornly. Yang Kai snorted, "So what if I don't?" Could he force a cow to drink water? Li Shiqing stared at him seriously for a while before suddenly throwing the clothes in her hand to the ground, turning around and flying back the way she had come. Yang Kai was stunned on the spot and only reacted after a while. His figure flickered as his space principles fluctuated and he appeared in front of Li Shiqing, gritting his teeth as he asked, "What are you doing?" "Going back. Aren't they very worried about me?" Li Shiqing replied matter-of-factly. Yang Kai's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he looked her up and down. "You're going to run back like this?" Li Shiqing smiled and said, "So what if I am?" "Are you crazy?" Yang Kai simply didn't know what to say to her. Although most of the people there were women, and the only man was blind, running around naked like this was unacceptable. Moreover, although Jiao Zhon was blind, he had the cultivation level of the Emperor realm. With a sweep of his divine sense, he could see everything clearly. Thinking of this possibility, Yang Kai's heart felt stifled. Then you help me put it on. Li Shiqing looked at him with a smug expression. Yang Kai's expression immediately changed. He gritted his teeth for a long time before cursing out loud, "You're a fucking lunatic." As he spoke, he flashed over and grabbed Li Shiqing's jade hand, pulling her towards the lakeside. Li Shiqing allowed him to hold her hand, her face filled with tenderness and sweetness. She smiled like a general who had just won a battle. Returning to the lakeside, Yang Kai picked up the clothes that she had thrown on the ground before. After fiddling with them for a while, he finally figured out how to put on a woman's clothes. When had he ever helped a woman put on her clothes? He was always only responsible for taking them off. During the process of putting on the clothes, Yang Kai resisted the throbbing in his heart. It was very difficult, but Li Shiqing still shamelessly said, "If you want to touch it, you can touch it. I don't mind." Yang Kai's psychological defense instantly collapsed. He didn't have so many scruples and intentionally or unintentionally took advantage of her, causing Li Shiqing to pant and her cheeks to turn red. After a long struggle, they finally put on the clothes. Yang Kai's heart was tired. He squinted at her and said, "Why did the great emperors accept a disciple like you? Isn't she afraid of ruining the reputation of the sect?" Li Shiqing pursed her lips and smiled, then hooked her finger at Yang Kai. "What now?" Yang Kai looked vigilant. "Come here. You first tell me what you want." Yang Kai was unmoved. Li Shiqing stomped her feet and took the initiative to walk over. Then, she leaned forward and pressed her red lips against Yang Kai's. Yang Kai stood in the same place like a wooden block. When their lips separated, he coldly said, "What is the meaning of this?" Li Shiqing smiled slightly. "Nothing, I just want to kiss you." Yang Kai's smile became even colder. "Do you think you can just pretend to be innocent and naive? I want to see how you will explain it to the great emperors when you go back." Li Shiqing said, "You don't have to worry about that." Yang Kai was surprised. "You are not afraid of your master?" Li Shiqing looked at him with a smile. "Are you trying to trick me? In fact, if you want to know something, you can ask me directly and I will tell you. Only a ghost would believe you." Yang Kai had many questions he wanted to ask her, such as why she had planted that heart seal secret technique on him, making everyone feel uncomfortable, and whether she had deliberately led him here. But he knew that even if he asked, he wouldn't get any answers from Li Shiqing. The disappearance of the children and disciples of the great emperors still had no clue, and now that such a thing had happened, Yang Kai's mind was in a mess. Li Shiqing took out a veil and said while putting it on, "In fact, I came here specifically for you." "For me?" Yang Kai frowned. "How were you so sure I would come?" Li Shiqing took a deep breath, causing her full breasts to rise and fall as she explained, "This place is an independent sealed world. If you want to open the entrance, you must be proficient in space principles. In the entire star boundary, there are only two people who have the ability to do so, one is you and the other is Li Wuyi. Li Wuyi is in the Eastern Territory and this matter involves Lan Zun, so the people from Star Soul Palace will definitely come to you for help." Sure enough, they really did find you. Hearing this, Yang Kai frowned and asked suspiciously, "Don't tell me that everything here was done by the great emperors of the Flower Shadow Palace." Lan Zun and Yarrow Lin were all captured by the great emperors of the Flower Shadow Palace. Li Shiqing smiled lightly. "Of course not, this matter has nothing to do with her." "Nothing to do with her?" Yang Kai raised his brow. "It has nothing to do with her." Li Shiqing slowly shook her head and gave a definite answer. Yang Kai, on the other hand, felt his blood run cold. "You are not Li Shiqing, who are you?" The great emperors of the Flower Shadow Palace were actually just her from her mouth, and Yang Kai didn't feel any sense of respect from Li Shiqing at all. If this Li Shiqing in front of him was really Li Shiqing, then as a disciple of the great emperors of the Flower Shadow Palace, how could she behave like this? At the very least, she should show the respect of a disciple to their honored master. Combined with the heart enchantment seal, Yang Kai could almost conclude that this Li Shiqing in front of him was a fake. 10,000 Flower Valley would never teach such a charming technique. Li Shiqing was stunned for a moment before smiling. Did I reveal any flaws? She had felt that Yang Kai was trying to trick her before, but she didn't want to reveal anything, so she had inadvertently exposed herself. You really are not Li Shiqing. Yang Kai's heart filled with a chill, feeling that things were becoming more and more complicated. Where is the real Li Shiqing? What did you do to her? Li Shiqing frowned as she looked at Yang Kai. Isn't it enough to have me? Why do you care about other women? Stop pestering me. Answer me. What did you do to her? On the way here, he had received some information that the disciple of the great emperors of the Flower Shadow Palace, Li Shiqing, had indeed gone missing. Since the one in front of him was a fake, where was the real Li Shiqing? Li Shiqing helplessly sighed. She's fine, she just went somewhere. Where did she go? Li Shiqing looked at him with a smile. To a place I want to take you to. If you promise to come with me, I'll tell you. Good, I promise you, Yang Kai readily agreed. Li Shiqing giggled. I'm not a 3-year-old child, how could I be so easily fooled? Yang Kai suddenly stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, staring at her affectionately. Whether or not it's the effect of that secret technique, at this moment, I feel that I don't want to be separated from you. If you go somewhere, I will naturally go there. These words seemed to have a big impact on Li Shiqing, causing her body to soften and her whole body to fall into Yang Kai's embrace, a happy and sweet smile blossoming on her face as she whispered softly, I believe you are sincere, but I also believe you have other intentions. Unless you come with me to that place, I won't tell you. Yang Kai immediately threw her away, abandoning her like a worn-out shoe. Chapter 3376. You really don't want to come with me? I can accompany you for the rest of your life, never to be separated. Li Shiqing looked at him sincerely. Yang Kai said impatiently, I hate it when people talk to me in riddles. First, tell me who you are, where you want me to go, and what you want me to do there. Li Shiqing hesitated for a moment before saying, it's not convenient to say anything else for the time being. I can only tell you that something big will happen in the near future, and you, who are proficient in space principles, will play a big role in it. Otherwise, do you think I would come here in person? As for who I am, you will know in the future. My identity will not be a disgrace to you. Yang Kai sneered, you might as well not have said anything. Rolling his eyes, he said, rest for a moment, we'll go find them later. Saying so, he didn't bother to pay attention to her and sat down. With the help of the enough-as heart seal secret technique, Yang Kai didn't have to be on guard against Li Shiqing trying to harm him. He had seen and touched every part of her body, so if she had any ill intentions, she would have already revealed them, so Yang Kai felt quite at ease in front of her. Seeing him sit down, Li Shiqing suddenly leaned over. What? Do you want to use my secret technique to find out my identity? This woman is really smart. The corner of Yang Kai's mouth twitched. Didn't they say that women with big breasts have no brains? He really did have this idea. He couldn't get any useful information from Li Shiqing, but today's matter wasn't completely untraceable. The best way to find out was the so-called heart seal secret technique. Yang Kai clearly felt that there was something extra in his knowledge before, but he couldn't find it. Now that he thought about it, the extra thing should be the heart seal secret technique. As long as he could find the source of this secret technique and carefully identify it, he might be able to find some clues. Opening his eyes, Yang Kai looked at her. Are you going to stop me? Li Shiqing covered her mouth and giggled. Why would I stop you? If you want to investigate, feel free to do so, but I have to remind you that this technique is illusory and traceless, and anyone who is afflicted with it will be bound for life. There is no way to remove it. Not to mention that you are just a second-order Emperor Realm Master, even the great emperors wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Yang Kai curled his lips and said, bullshit. No matter who this Li Shiqing was, or where she came from, her cultivation was the same as his, a second-order Emperor Realm Master. Yet, she dared to make such a big claim. Yang Kai really wanted to spit on her face. Li Shiqing smiled and said, then work hard. Big sister will wait for you. Yang Kai snorted, speak properly. Li Shiqing fell silent. Yang Kai also closed his eyes and condensed his soul avatar in his knowledge sea, carefully searching the area. Half an hour later, Yang Kai opened his eyes with a gloomy face. Li Shiqing immediately asked, "How is it?" Yang Kai glared at her. "Don't be so smug. We are in a hurry now, so I don't have the time to search carefully. I'll definitely teach you a lesson later. Then I'll be looking forward to it." Li Shiqing smiled, pausing for a moment before asking, "Where are we going now?" Kai Yang really wanted to say to her, "You go your own way, I'll go mine," but when the words reached his mouth, he couldn't bring himself to say it. He could only mutter, "Go back and find them." Suddenly, he warned her, "If you dare to touch them, I won't forgive you." Li Shiqing said, "Don't worry, I've already achieved the purpose of this trip. I just need to stay by your side in the future." Yang Kai frowned, "Aren't you going back to 10,000 Flower Valley?" Li Shiqing smiled, "I'm not Li Shiqing. Why would I go back to 10,000 Flower Valley? Then how are we going to explain this to the great emperors? If she pursues this matter, your identity will definitely be exposed." Li Shiqing blinked, "Are you worried about me? Don't think too highly of yourself. I'm worried that I will be implicated." Having said that, after we go out, even if the great emperors don't pursue this matter, I'll still have to tell her. Li Shiqing didn't comment, "As long as you're happy." She looked as if she knew that Yang Kai wouldn't leak the secret, causing Yang Kai to grit his teeth in anger. With a look of dissatisfaction, he said, "Let's not talk about other things for the time being. You should at least tell me your name, right?" Li Shiqing was silent for a moment, then she smiled, "Are you Meng? You are you Meng?" Yang Kai nodded slightly and said no more, taking the lead to return the way they came. Yu Meng naturally kept up with him, but after flying for a few miles, she suddenly heard a thunderous sound coming from the sky. The sound was like thunder, causing the world to shake. A terrifying pressure descended from the sky, causing Yang Kai's expression to change dramatically. He suddenly stopped and looked up at the grey sky, a look of surprise on his face. The thunderous sound was not real thunder, but someone fighting in the sky. What shocked Yang Kai the most was that the cultivation of the people fighting had reached the level of the great emperors. Just the aftermath alone was enough to cause his blood to boil, forcing him to circulate his emperor chi to protect his body and mind. Great emperors are actually fighting here? This battle couldn't be a one-man show. In other words, there were two great emperors fighting in this strange place. Who were they? Was the one who first broke into this place when he opened the entrance also involved? "It's starting." Yu Meng's soft whisper suddenly reached his ears. Yang Kai turned his head and saw her looking up at the sky with a solemn face, and there was even a hint of excitement and expectation in her beautiful eyes. Looking at her, Yang Kai was slightly taken aback, because he found that Yu Meng did not circulate her emperor chi to protect herself. This made Yang Kai doubt his eyes. They were both second-order Emperor Realm Masters, so why was Yu Meng so calm? Was she not affected by the aftermath of the battle at all? Yang Kai did not believe that there was anyone in this world who was stronger than him in the second-order Emperor realm. If he used his full strength, he could even exchange blows with a fake emperor, but Yu Meng's performance was better than his at the moment, which naturally surprised him. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, "What's starting?" Yu Meng shook her head and did not answer. Another loud cracking sound rang out, and a pitch-black crack suddenly appeared in the sky. It was incomparably huge, as if an invisible beast had opened its mouth and was about to swallow the entire world. The space they were in became a little turbulent. Tiny cracks appeared and then disappeared. This small world could not bear the fierce battle between the two great emperors. In such a short period of time, such a strange phenomenon had already appeared. If this continued, this small world might very well be shattered. Thinking so, Yang Kai shouted, "Let's go." Saying so, he hurriedly flew forward. Yu Meng glanced at the sky again before following. After a while, several figures appeared in front of them, and when they met, Yang Kai found that they were Lan Zun, Lin Yun and the others. "Senior Sister Li, are you okay?" Lan Zun glanced at Yu Meng, who was following behind Yang Kai, and asked. "She's fine." Yang Kai shook his head, but did not explain what Yu Meng had done or how she had disappeared under everyone's nose. In fact, he didn't understand either. It's not good to stay here for a long time. Please follow me and find the exit as soon as possible. Lan Xun and the others nodded solemnly. As long as one was not blind, they could see that when immortals fought, mortals would suffer. If they didn't want to be implicated, it was best to leave this place. But where the exit was, or if there was even an exit in this small world, no one knew, so Yang Kai could only lead everyone forward while secretly praying for a way out. As they walked, Lin Yuna suddenly exclaimed, "It's Master's aura." Yang Kai turned to look at her and pointed to the sky. "Is the Iron Blood Master over there?" Lin Yuna nodded and said, "Yes, it is indeed Master's aura." She was the only disciple of the Iron Blood Great Emperor, and had been with the Iron Blood Great Emperor for so many years, so she naturally could not be wrong. "So the Iron Blood Master is here," Jiao Zhan suddenly said. "No wonder his attacks are so powerful." Lan Xun said, "Who is fighting the Iron Blood Master?" Everyone shook their heads when they heard this. Although they could sense that it must be another great emperor's, no one knew who that person was. At this moment, the grey world suddenly darkened, as if all the light had been covered, causing the world to enter the deepest night in an instant. Even people from the Emperor realm like everyone else could no longer see anything clearly. Not only was their vision blocked, even their divine sense seemed to have entered a dark space, unable to perceive the existence of anything. "The Night Shadow Great Emperors!" Lan Xun exclaimed in shock. Such an obvious sign allowed her to immediately lock onto the identity of the other great emperors fighting the Iron Blood Great Emperor. Only that person could have such magical means. The Night Shadow Great Emperors were the masters of darkness, so such a change could not be more obvious. "Is it really him?" Yang Kai frowned. On the way here, he had heard Xiao Yuyang mention that they had guessed that Lan Xun's disappearance might be related to the Night Shadow Great Emperors, but that was just a guess after all. Now, it seemed that this guess might be true. Jiao Zhan was puzzled. Strange, why are the Iron Blood Master and the Night Shadow Master fighting? Their vision was blurred, and their divine sense perception was also hazy, so everyone could only stop in place. Yang Kai said solemnly, "Star Soul Palace suspects that your capture is related to the Shadow Killer Temple. If this is true, then it's not surprising that the two of them are fighting. But how difficult would it be to determine a winner when two great emperors fought? No one knew when this battle would end, so Yang Kai was secretly anxious. In the current situation, everyone could neither advance nor retreat. Could they only wait in place? But if this world was shattered by the two great emperors, no one would have a good end. If they were not careful, they would be swallowed into the void. Just as he was thinking this, a bright light suddenly bloomed in the sky, dispelling the darkness that had obscured the light. Everyone looked up and saw a full moon hanging high in the sky, exuding a bright and soft light. "Father!" Lan Xun called out in surprise. Chapter 3377. As soon as Lan Xun spoke, everyone realized that the Bright Moon Great Emperors were also here. This was in line with the information Yang Kai had obtained before. Star Soul Palace had received a message from the Great Emperor's Bright Moon and had tracked them all the way here. They had also guessed that the Great Emperors had entered this world, and now it seemed that this was indeed the case. The Bright Moon Great Emperors had indeed entered this world. The full moon in the sky was the best proof. In other words, there were actually 3 emperor-level existences gathered in this strange world, and they were fighting fiercely. What was certain was that the Great Emperor's Bright Moon and the Great Emperor's Night Shadow were on opposite sides. As for which side the Iron Blood Great Emperor was on, it was not clear, but it was very likely that he had joined forces with the Bright Moon Great Emperors. Above the heavens, darkness swept out again, competing with the brilliance of the full moon. The collision of light and darkness was a battle of world principles between the two great emperors. If it were a one-on-one battle, it would be hard to say which of these two great emperors was stronger. They were like fire and water, but at this time, there was an additional Iron Blood Great Emperor, Zhon Wu Hen. 2 against 1, there was no doubt that the Great Emperor's Night Shadow would suffer some losses. From the vision in the sky, it could be seen that although the darkness was powerful, It was obviously inferior to the brilliance of the light and was being suppressed bit by bit. Occasionally, a long roar would ring out, shaking the heavens and earth. Yang Kai and the others watched quietly. Except for the somewhat heartless Mo Xiaoqi and the meaningful Yu Meng, everyone else wore a dignified expression. Because no one knew what had caused these three great emperors to fight here. If it was just because their disciples or descendants had been captured, it should not have caused such a ruckus. After all, a war between the great emperors was not a trivial matter. It was very likely that it would shake the entire star boundary. Lan Xun, Lin Yun and the others had not suffered any harm and were simply trapped in this world. The shockwaves spread to every corner of this world. Layers of ripples appeared in the space, and it became more and more unstable. Yang Kai took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "We should go." Lan Xun recovered, retracted her gaze, and looked at Yang Kai. But which direction should we go? How could Yang Kai know about this? He could only look at Gao Zhon. Brother Gao, isn't it time for a divination? Yang Kai had seen Gao Zhon's ability a moment ago. He could even calculate Yu Meng's whereabouts. So, calculating the location of the exit shouldn't be difficult, right? Unexpectedly, Gao Zhon only shook his head slowly. There's nothing I can do. Yang Kai then looked at Yu Meng. If he couldn't count on Gao Zhon, then he could only count on this woman. She seemed to know something, but no matter how Yang Kai asked, she didn't answer anything substantial. Their eyes met and Yu Meng said indifferently, "Why is Brother Yang looking at me? Shiqing doesn't know about this either." Bitch. Yang Kai was sure that she definitely knew, but she pretended to be Li Shiqing and said such words. He was so angry that he really wanted to tear off her disguise here. He immediately said in a deep voice, "We may really die here. If you know anything, please tell me." Yu Meng slowly shook her head. Brother Yang is joking. Shiqing has been sleeping until you came and was awakened. She really knows nothing about this place. Lan Xun said, "Brother Yang, don't embarrass senior sister Li. She really doesn't know. You were deceived by her." Yang Kai roared in his heart. This woman is not the Li Shiqing you know. But the matter had come to this. Yang Kai had no choice but to say, "Then it depends on our luck. If we are lucky, we may leave this place alive. If we are unlucky," he paused and said, "we will all die here together." After speaking, he glared fiercely at Yu Meng. Yu Meng turned a deaf ear to him, but a mischievous light flashed in her eyes. The battle in the sky became more and more intense. The three great emperors seemed to be going all out from the beginning without holding back, making the world show more and more signs of collapse. No one dared to stay in place for long and could only move forward. Not long after, Yang Kai's expression suddenly changed and he looked up ahead. "What's wrong?" Lan Xun asked, noticing a trace of abnormality in Yang Kai. "There are people." Yang Kai replied, using his divine sense to explore, "It's the people from Star Soul Palace. Elder Shui and the others." Lan Xun's expression brightened. Yang Kai nodded and sped up to meet them. The people on the other side obviously noticed the situation here and also rushed over. A moment later, the two sides met. "Your Highness." Shui Zhengmao's face lit up after seeing Lan Xun and he quickly stepped forward to check if she was injured. Only after confirming that she was safe and sound did he relax. Xiao Yuyang walked over to Yang Kai and asked, "How did you find them?" Yang Kai frowned, "I don't know who led me there. They must have been hit by some kind of secret technique before, so they have been unconscious." "Someone led you there?" Xiao Yuyang was stunned when he heard this. Yang Kai nodded, "Now that I think about it, the person who led me there was either the Bright Moon Great Master or the Iron Blood Master. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to find them so easily." Xiao Yuyang pondered for a moment before nodding, "That's reasonable. It should be either the Bright Moon Great Emperors or the Iron Blood Great Emperor who discovered the location of Lan Xun and the others, but had other important matters to attend to, so it wasn't convenient for him to bring these juniors with him, so he led Yang Kai over and left this matter to him. Elder Xiao, there is another thing I need to tell you." Yang Kai's expression suddenly became solemn. "What?" Xiao Yuyang and the others from Star Soul Palace all turned to look at him. Yang Kai's lips squirmed a few times before he finally said, "We need to find a way to leave this place as soon as possible. If my guess is correct, if those masters continue fighting like this world will collapse." "So that's what he's talking about." Xiao Yuyang laughed. Even if Yang Kai didn't mention it, they would have noticed it. Shuezheng Maro said, "We have also been looking for an exit, but unfortunately, we have found nothing. Do you have any clues here?" Yang Kai slowly shook his head. This caused everyone's expression to darken. They hadn't found anything, and neither had Yang Kai, so how were they supposed to get out? Xiao Yuyang asked, "Since you are proficient in space principles, can't you tear space and open an exit?" Yang Kai shook his head and said, "I can't. After all, this is an independent small world with its own world principles and barriers. With my current attainments in the Tao of space, I can't tear the barriers of this world. Even if I tear space and open an exit, I can only go to another place in this world, I can't return to the star boundary." Shuezheng Maro said, "In that case, we can only search slowly. Since we can come in, we can naturally leave." Looking up at the sky, he said in a dignified voice, "I hope we can make it in time." Waving his hand, he said, "Let's go." The group hurriedly followed. Whether it was intentional or not, Yu Meng fell behind and flew out side by side with Yang Kai. Suddenly, her voice came to his ear, "Did you want to expose me just now?" Yang Kai squinted at her, "So what if I did?" Yu Meng's eyes curved as she smiled, "Then why didn't you take action?" "It's none of your business." Yang Kai replied bitterly, "I knew you couldn't bear to." Yu Meng smiled even more happily. Yang Kai coldly snorted, "Now that we don't know if you're alive or dead, it's meaningless to expose you. If we can really find an exit, I will definitely reveal the truth to everyone. Just wait for your death." Yu Meng said, "Then don't be sad when the time comes." In your dreams, Yang Kai was furious and suddenly sped up, leaving her behind. Staring at his back, a smile flashed across Yu Meng's eyes as she followed behind him unhurriedly. Time passed by little by little. After one day and one night, everyone's mood became a little restless. After searching for so long, they still couldn't find the exit. The battle between the three great emperors lasted for an entire day and night, turning the whole world upside down. In the void, there were void cracks everywhere. Yang Kai was leading the way because without his guidance, no one would be able to fly in this environment. If they were not careful, they would rush into a void crack or be cut by one of the small and invisible void cracks, dying an unnatural death. At a certain moment, a dazzling light suddenly lit up between the heavens and earth. Everyone who was rushing forward couldn't help but stop and look up. Above the sky, a huge black curtain collided with the light of the full moon, eliminating each other. At the same time, a deafening rumbling sound rang out. The earth cracked open, and incomparably huge, abyss-like ravines appeared. At this moment, the void was like a shattered mirror, and cracks crazily spread in all directions. Rivers flowed in reverse, and mountains disintegrated. "Not good," Xiao Yuyang exclaimed. Their previous guess had come true. This world couldn't withstand the fierce confrontation between the three great emperors and was really about to collapse. All these strange phenomena were just a precursor to the collapse. "Everyone, come here," Shuezheng Maro shouted. At this time, they didn't have the time to look for an exit. They could only stay in place and gather everyone's strength to resist the power of the heavens and earth. They might be able to survive for a while, otherwise, they would definitely die. Everyone also realized this and gathered around him. As their emperor Qi surged, a dozen or so people worked together, trying to maintain the stability of the place they were in. They didn't want to let the area around them be affected by the collapse of the world. Yang Kai turned his head and looked at Yu Meng, his eyes spitting fire as he sent a message, "Will you only be happy if everyone dies here?" Yu Meng replied lightly, "What does the life or death of others have to do with me? As for you, you have the space principles. Will you die here?" "Bitch!" Yang Kai cursed angrily. Yu Meng was stunned for a moment, then gritted her teeth and said, "What did you call me?" "You are a cheap person," Kai Yang responded slowly, one word at a time. He had even cursed the dragon race's second elder. So what did Yu Meng count for? Chapter 3378. Yu Meng was obviously furious. She had never heard anyone scold her so viciously, especially when the person who scolded her was Yang Kai. She gritted her teeth and said, "I'll kill you." Yang Kai sneered, "Try it if you have the guts." He didn't believe that Yu Meng would really dare to attack him in front of everyone. If she really did so, her identity would definitely be exposed immediately. As long as she still had some ulterior motives, she would never waste her previous hard work. He thought it would be like this. Who would have thought that just as he spoke, he would see Yu Meng's beautiful eyes staring at him with a sneer. Immediately after, his knowledge sea suddenly tumbled and a splitting headache assaulted him. Yang Kai couldn't help but let out a muffled groan as his body swayed. Not only him, but Yu Meng herself was also like this. It was obvious that when Yang Kai was suffering this pain, she herself seemed to be implicated. Her crystal-clear skin was a little pale and fine sweat appeared on her forehead. If it were normal times, the abnormalities of the two would certainly not be hidden from the perception of the people around them, but at this moment, everyone was working hard to maintain the stability of the area within a radius of more than 100 feet, not allowing this place to be affected by the aftermath of the battle between the great emperors. Who would have the time to care about others? Therefore, the abnormal reactions of the two were so quiet that no one noticed it. "What did you do?" Yang Kai was shocked. He didn't notice that Yu Meng had made a move at all, but his head felt like it was about to explode. What the hell was going on? "I'm going to die with you." Yu Meng gritted her teeth and replied. Her voice was intermittent. It was obvious that she was enduring great pain. "Are you crazy?" Yang Kai's face changed drastically. What kind of situation was this? And this woman was still playing like this. She was simply a madwoman. "Who told you to scold me?" Yu Meng stubbornly looked at Yang Kai, sweat appearing on her forehead. "I just scolded you. If you're not happy, you can scold me back." Yang Kai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why hurt each other? "Apologize. Apologize your mother. How dare you scold me?" Yu Meng trembled all over, either from anger or pain. Lan Zun finally noticed a trace of abnormality and asked with concern, "Senior Sister Li, are you okay?" Yu Meng slowly shook her head, not saying a word. Yang Kai transmitted his voice at the right time, "If there's anything, we can deal with it later. Don't mess around now." Yu Meng said coldly, "No one has ever scolded me like this. No one can scold me like this. Unless you apologize, I will die with you here." Yang Kai was speechless. His face twitched for a while, and he could only comfort her. Okay, I was wrong just now. I won't scold you anymore. A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. What's the big deal about apologizing? You said it yourself." "Yes, that's what I said." "You heard me right." Only then did Yu Meng stop. After a moment of silence, she asked with concern, "Does it hurt?" "What do you think?" Yang Kai was furious. He felt that this woman changed her attitude faster than flipping a book. "I was just angry. Don't provoke me like this next time." Perhaps because of the change in her mood, Yu Meng felt a little guilty about what she had done just now. Her tone was so gentle that it was enough to make a Vajra melt. Yang Kai rolled his eyes and asked, "Was that also the power of your heart seal secret technique?" Yu Meng didn't comment. Naturally, she realized that Yang Kai was just trying to get information out of her. Yang Kai wanted to ask a few more questions, but he didn't have the chance. After a short while, the world around them finally collapsed. The earth and space cracked open piece by piece, and then, under the influence of some unknown force, they gradually drifted away into the depths of the void. This was the first time that everyone had seen such a strange scene. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines as they watched. "It's over." Shui Zhengmao let out a long sigh. As the great elder of Star Soul Palace, a third-order Emperor Realm Master who had lived for so many years, he wasn't afraid of death, but Lan Zun was still here. If he died, then so be it, but what if Lan Zun died? Moreover, In addition to Lan Xun, there were also the descendants and disciples of the other 4 great emperors here. Everyone was a little worried for a while. Yang Kai, on the other hand, was calm. Although he had described the situation as very dangerous before, in fact, if it really came to that point, he could only take everyone here into the sealed world bead and then find a way to escape through the void. As long as he was safe, everyone else would be safe. If it were any other time, he would have had great confidence in escaping safely, but at this time, there were 3 great emperors fighting here, and the entire world was collapsing. He didn't know what kind of situation he would face when the time came, so he didn't dare to make any unnecessary promises to everyone. He was only prepared to take action when the situation became extremely bad. Catcha catcha sounds rang out incessantly as the world collapsed faster and faster, pieces of earth drifting away and gradually disappearing. In less than 2 hours, the place where they were standing had already been reduced to nothingness. Only the place where they were standing was safe because of the protection of everyone. However, it was only a radius of a few dozen feet, making everyone feel as if they were trapped on an island in the sea. And this island was still flowing in the cracks of space. There was no light, no path of origin, as if it had been forgotten by the entire world. Chem. Yang Kai suddenly raised his brow and fixed his eyes in a certain direction. What's wrong? Xiao Yu Yang, who was standing next to him, heard his voice and asked. Yang Kai didn't answer and just silently sensed his surroundings. After a while, his expression brightened. There is an exit over there. Everyone was overjoyed when they heard this, and Lei Hong shouted, an exit into the star boundary? Yang Kai nodded and said, it's very likely. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go and take a look, Lei Hong shouted impatiently. Yang Kai gently nodded and was about to lead everyone in that direction when his figure suddenly froze. After carefully sensing for a while, his expression changed greatly. Not good, run. Saying so, he pushed his space principles to wrap everyone up and lead them in the opposite direction. Everyone was confused, but seeing Yang Kai's dignified expression, they knew that the situation was not good. In this damned place, only Yang Kai, who was proficient in space principles, had the authority to speak, so he must have noticed something and made such a choice. Shuttling through the void was extremely dangerous, and without Yang Kai's protection, it would have been impossible for these 12 or 20 people to stay together. Perhaps they would have scattered in the blink of an eye. Everyone also wanted to know what Yang Kai had noticed that caused him to act like he was facing a great enemy, but at this time it was obviously not convenient to ask. However, their doubts did not last long as soon a trace of abnormal movement came from behind them. Rumbling sounds resounded throughout the universe. It was as if something was rolling over in large quantities, wanting to fill up the entire void. Xue Zhengmao and the others hurriedly looked back but could not see anything at all. Even when they released their divine senses, they could not spread too far. In this void, their strength was completely suppressed. After what seemed like an incense stick worth of time, or perhaps just a dozen breaths of time, a ray of light suddenly appeared in front of them. Seeing this light, everyone couldn't help feeling as if a window had been opened in a dark room. Even without Yang Kai's explanation, everyone knew that the source of this light was the location of an exit, causing them to feel overjoyed. As the saying goes, those who survive a great disaster are bound to have good fortune in the future. This narrow escape from death was a valuable experience for all of them. The group quickly followed behind Yang Kai and soon arrived at the source of the light and rushed out. Their field of vision blurred, and as soon as they arrived, all they saw was yellow sand and a strong wind blowing, filling the air with sand and dust. We're back. Xue Zhengmao's expression brightened. Furthermore, they had returned to the place where they had first entered. This was clearly the sea of sand. Looking down, they saw the huge funnel beneath their feet. They had never expected that after the collapse of that world, they would actually find a way to survive. Let's go. Yang Kai did not linger and instead continued flying forward. Seeing him act like he was avoiding snakes and scorpions, everyone had no time to rejoice, suppressing the doubts in their hearts and quickly following. After flying 100 kilometers, Yang Kai stopped and turned around to look back, his expression extremely solemn. Yang Kai, what did you notice? Xiao Yu Yang walked up to him and asked while also looking back. Yang Kai shook his head and said, I hope my inference is wrong. If it is, the great calamity is about to begin, Gao Zhon suddenly said out of the blue. At this moment, he also opened his white eyes. There was a strange light flowing in his eyes, piercing through the void as he stared at the funnel. Yang Kai turned his head and looked at him, feeling the urge to tear his mouth off. This guy was useless when he was needed, but when he was not, he would jinx things and be very effective. Before, he had warned him to be careful, but in the end, he had really been tricked by Yu Meng. Now, he was saying that the great calamity was about to begin. This guy definitely has no friend. Yang Kai concluded in his heart. With a loud bang, sand and dust flew everywhere. A pitch-black aura suddenly rushed out from the sand funnel, straight into the sky, and then crazily spread in all directions. Wherever the pitch-black aura passed, everything changed, as if the world had lost its color. That's... Shuizhenmao and the others stared with wide eyes as they stared in a daze, suddenly feeling a chill run down their spines. Yang Kai sighed. He had been praying that his guess was wrong, but it had actually come true. However, what was going on here? Demonic qi! Xiao Yuyang exclaimed. Even from 100 kilometers away, he could perceive the various evils contained in this dark aura. On top of that, a few years ago, the demon thought had broken out in Orthodoxy Temple in the Southern Territory. Xiao Yuyang was also present at that time, so he was naturally no stranger to demonic qi. However, the demonic qi in Orthodoxy Temple at that time was incomparable to what he was seeing now. Whether it was quality or quantity, it was obviously not on the same level. How could demonic qi be erupting from the sand funnel, and in such a continuous manner, as if the sand funnel was connected to a source of demonic qi? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.